خليني مرحبا بكم مشاهدين لصوت الشعب. السلام عليكم. مساء الخير، صباح الخير لكل زول مشاهد لهذا الحلقة، وأنا سعيد إنه أكون معكم في هذا الصباح أو هذه الظهيرة في حلقة، وأنا قاعد أفتكر هي واحدة من الحلقات المهمة في منصة بتاعت صوت الشعب. خلوني أنا قبل ما نمشي قدام أرحب بالضيوف بتاعي الليلة في حلقة ده. أنا برحب بدكتور كيمو أديبو، وكذلك my colleague and co-host باشمهندس واريلي، وأيضا عندنا برضو ضيف مهم جدا بروفيسور كون مدود، هو موجود معنا في الحلقة الليلة. كلهم الضيوف بتاعنا طبعا للناس المشاهدين في فيسبوك، وكذلك الناس المشاهدين عبر يوتيوب. ضيوف بتاعنا هم يكونوا عبر كلاب هاوس، هم هسه كلهم موجودين. دكتور كيمو موجود، وكذلك باشمهندس واريلي موجود، اللي هو برضو هيكون معي كوهوس في إثارة النقاش وطرح الأسئلة. وأيضا معنا برضو بروفيسور كون، هو برضو موجود في الحلقة، برضو موجودين كلهم عبر الكلاب هاوس. الحاجة الثانية برضو اللي أنا داير نوضح للناس إنه حلقة بتاعت ليلة هياخد طريقة مختلفة من الحلقات. مرات أحيانا بنطرحها، هيكون حلقة شكل مفتوحة، وهنفتح فرصة للأسئلة. برضو هنكون لنا فرصة للناس. we're going to take question من الناس المستمعين في فيسبوك والمشاهدين في فيسبوك، وكذلك المشاهدين في يوتيوب والمستمعين في كلاب هاوس. هنفتح يد هندي نسمع للناس يكونوا معنا في منصة في وقت مبكر جدا من النقاش أو من الحوار، عشان برضو الناس دي تستطيع داير تطرح سؤال. معنا البروفيسور كيمو وبروفيسور كون مستمعين، وهم بالذات بروفيسور كيمو طبعا هو زول خبير اقتصادي، وبروفيسور كون برضو انثروبولوجيست، وهو برضو مرة الفات هو يعني بيجينا هنا وبيتكلم هنا، وبرضو عنده كتب كثيرة. الناس عارفين بروفيسور كون هو مقيم في كندا، وكذلك دكتور كيمو مقيم في كندا. قبل ما نمشي قدام في الحلقة، يعني قبل كم يوم عملنا حلقة هنا تعليقنا على القرارات بتاعت رئيس الجمهورية جنرال سلفاكير ميارديت، بالذات ما تعيين المحافظ الجديد للبنك المركزي لجنوب السودان. وفي أثناء بتاعت أعداء بتاعت القسم في ستيتمنت قالوا الرئيس لمحافظ الجديد بتاع البنك، وبرضه في ستيتمنت كان قالوا وزير المالية لمحافظ الجديد بتاع البنك. بناء على هذه الخطابات، منصة بتاع صوت الشعب وريش اوت تو بروفيسور دكتور كيمو كخبير اقتصادي وبرضه خبير بتاع الوورلد بنك، وسألناه في المدلول بتاع الكلام قالوا الرئيس قال إنه في البنك المركزي في كوميشن بتتاخد، يعني أي قروش بيطلع في البنك اللي ياخدوا منك نسبة 10%. ده طبعا في إطار بتاع الفساد في دولة بتاع جنوب السودان. فبرضه طرحنا سؤال لدكتور كيمو، كيف البنك المركزي بتاع جنوب السودان ما في حاجة بتتعمل يكون في كوميشن، وليه مثلا ما سمعنا إنه في زول يتحاكم قبل كده؟ ده كان سؤال طرحناه لدكتور كيمو في حلقة كانت مسجلة، انترفيو مسجل، وجينا شغلناه هنا. السؤال الثاني برضو كان طرحناه للدكتور كيمو. طرحنا سؤال لأنه محافظ وزير المالية ذكر للمحافظ بتاع البنك الجديد إنه لمدة 7 شهور استطاعت حكومة جنوب السودان أو وزارة مالية مثلا تفتش مرتبات للجنوبيين، وقدر يصرف ناس مرتب لمدة 7 شهور. لكن لما الناس لما يمشوا للبنك كل زول موظف بتاع حكومة جنوب السودان بدوك شيك، لكن امتي شيك فاضي ما في قروش. فبرضه طرحنا السؤال ده لدكتور كيمو، شغل هذا السياسة مثلا كخبير اقتصادي. وبرضه دكتور كيمو قدر يستجيب على الأسئلة وفي الحلقة المسجلة. برضه في كلاب هاوس the next day عملنا حلقة برضه ودكتور كيمو ضم لنا في كلاب هاوس وطرحنا له بعض الأسئلة طرحه برضه كان بعض الناس وكان المعرف إنه الحلقة كانت مسجلة بتاع دكتور كيمو. دكتور كيمو استجاب للنقاشات. إضافة لهذا أول امبارح راديو تمازج في جنوب السودان الناس قاعدين share the live video. It is very important for us also or for the others to be able to listen to our discussion today. راديو تمازج they reach out to Professor دكتور كيمو وعملوا حوار طويل جدا مع دكتور كيمو. وهذا الحوار للناس اللي قاعدين في مستمعين في كلاب هاوس انتم شايفين يا ده Q&A اللي هو question and answer موجود very long discussion. وبرضو يعني دكتور كيمو استجاب على الأسئلة كثيرة جدا ما قدرنا نطرحها له في خلال الحلقتين المضت لأنه الحوار بتاعنا كانت معسورة جدا. إذن خلال الحلقة بتاعت الليلة the main يعني topic أو تركيز بتاعتنا في الحلقة بتاعت الليلة قدرنا امبارح أنا وباشمهندس واريلة we reach into conclusion إنه في ضرورة لفتح حوار مع دكتور كيمو في بعض الحاجات لأنه حوار مع رياض التمازج كانت تقريبا question ما أوديو ما مسجل. ما كل الناس في جنوب السودان عندهم استطاعة إنهم يعني يقدر يقروا كلام المكتوب بالإنجليزي وكده. فقلنا أوكي خلينا نريش out and we open a discussion tonight with دكتور كيمو ومنه نمشي في شكل عميق شوية في شكل النقاش ونطرح برضو بعض المحطات بالعربي وبرضو للناس بيسألوا بإنجليزي. طبعا عندنا 2 بروفيسور قاعدين معنا هنا يعني كلهم they are well spoken in Arabic and English. وأيضا لو يكون لك سؤال كان بإنجليزي وبالعربي بيجاوبوا لك يعني. the others لو برضو local languages نحن ما قاعدين نستخدمهم في منصة بتاع صوت الشعب لكن هنا بنكتفي باللغتين الرسميتين إنجليزي والعربي. دكتور كيمو في خلال الحلقة الأول نحن قيمناه هنا في المنصة بتاع صوت الشعب أشار لكلام مهم جدا إنه no مثلا economic reform without political stability اللي هو economic reform require political stability. يعني لو في ناس بيتكلموا عن استقرار في الاقتصاد في جنوب السودان وبيتكلموا عن إنه مثلا في ظل الوضع الموجود الآن في جنوب السودان الما فيها political stability الما فيها استقرار أمني في جنوب السودان إنه الاقتصاد هتنبحر والناس هتصرف مرتبات بتاعتها وجنوب السودان هيكون في حالة بتاعت النهمة. أنا أفتكر ده كلام غير صحيح أشار له دكتور كيمو. على هذا الأساس نحن ندير نقاش بتاعتنا في الإطار ده. ثانيا دكتور كيمو أشار برضو لكلام نحن كنا بنكرر كل مرة لكن بقول part of it إنه الليلة هنا 2 بروفيسورز هم قاعدين هنا وبقدروا يقودوا في الحاجات كتير. أشار قبل كم يوم برضو في منصة بتاعت صوت الشعب هنا إنه لابد من العودة إلى منصة التأسيس. لو تشوف يعني تستمعوا كتير هنا بنكرر الكلمة ده. أنا كإدوارد باشمهندس واريلا أمباسادور إيمانويل مولانا تريزا باشمهندس دومينيك وكل رفاق التانيين كومباتيور صاحب منابوي وكل رفاق في السوشيال ميديا we always نينا بنقول إنه لابد إنه جنوب السودان ترجع لمنصة بتاعت التأسيس. إذن في دعوة إلى عودة جنوب السودان إلى منصة بتاعت التأسيس برضو أنا حاول ندي فرصة بعدين لدكتور كيمو وبروفيسور كون إنه كده شوية برضو يتكلموا لنا ما هي أهمية عودة جنوب السودان إلى منصة بتاعت التأسيس مدخل ضروري الاستقرار السياسي والاقتصادي في جنوب السودان. خليني أنا داير أدي فرصة لباشمهندس واريلا يقول كلام بسيط وبعد ذاك ندي فرص للدكتور كيمو وبروفيسور كون يرحبوا بكم قبل ما نبدأ الحلقة لأنه في like 2 videos تقريبا they are short 10 minutes 1 minute. أنا داير I want to play them before ما نبدأ الحوار مع باشمهندس واريلي مع دكتور كيمو وبروفيسور كون، وبعد ذلك أننا بنخوض في نقاش. باشمهندس واريلي تفضل.
Okay, hi to everybody. أنا بدون أي مقدمات I say hi to everybody. وأنا ما أعرف إنت تقدر تدير الحوار كيف، لكن after you play the videos أنا I'm hoping I will make a snapshots بتاع the points that was mentioned by Dr. Kimo in the interview with Radis Tamazic on June the 20th. The highlights بتاعه. Then I will build some. I want to discuss with him or with the panelists some points and focusing on asking specific questions so that it enriches and the discussion and expands on what he had answered on Reddit Tamazic. So I will leave it at here. Go ahead and play the videos that you want to play. Then I will chip in after the colleagues have introduced themselves. Thank you very much.
Very good جدا. يا actually أنا خدت مرتب زي ده إنه أنا أديك فرصة عشان تعمل summary للحوار بتاع الدكتور كيمو في رياض تمازيج قبل ما أنا هنا نديهم فرصة. لكن خليني ناس كثيرين طبعا قاعدين يسألوا في فيسبوك وفي يوتيوب who is واريلي and who is كون دكتور كون and دكتور كيمو. كل ما زول يتكلم أنا أخذ صورة بتاعه فوق واسمه في فيسبوك ويوتيوب زي ما أنت شايفين هسه. انتوا شايفين صوره بتاعت باشمهندس واريلي يا ده اسمه قدامكم انجينير واريلي يا ده الصوره بتاعه. خلينا ندي فرصه لدكتور كيمو. دكتور كيمو نحن دايرينك كلمه بتاع قصيره للمستمعين قبل ما نبدا بعد شويه. تفضل دكتور.
شكرا جزيلا إدوارد والأخوة الموجودين في المنصه والناس القاعدين.
زيد الصوت شويه يا دكتور لو ممكن. شكرا.
كده كيف؟
يا جو اهيد. لو الناس اللي فيسبوك ويوتيوب انتوا ما سامعين بعدين برضو ورونا. فضل دكتور. كويس.
يعني برحب بالناس كلها صراحه. الحضور يعني انه الناس معنيه بالمشاكل اللي بتمر بها البلد، ووجودنا هنا هو مساهمه مننا انه قضايا البلد لازم تتناقش بموضوعيه بطريقه علميه بعيدا عن الفزلكه بتاعت السياسيين. وده مهم في رايي انه الناس تكون مستنيره بالشيء الحاصل. حتى لما تتحدث عن التغيير لازم تكون متاكد انه فعلا الوضع اللي يكون فوقه ده وضع غير منشود وغير مرغوب فيه، فهم بيقدروا ينضموا للمسيره بتاعت التغيير. فدي مساهمتنا ونحن حضور دائما، يعني كل ما اتيحت لنا الفرصه ويتوفر الزمن يعني. واتمنى انه الحوار يكون موضوعي ويكون هادف ويكون بناء بحيث انه نحن نقدر نصل لحل بتاعت المشاكل. يعني زي ما انا قلت يا بدايه، انا في رايي العلم والمعرفه ما حكر على اي زول. اذا كانوا هم بيستمعوا مثلا هم بيستمعوا لارائنا وبيحطوها في الاعتبار، فدي برضه بتكون محمده في راينا وبيكون شكل من اشكال المساهمه. يعني في النهايه بتكون برضه جزء احنا ساهمنا في حل القضايا بتاعت البلد، لانه ما في جهه معينه ما في شخص معين بيحتكر بلد او بيحتكر حل المشاكل. وانا برضه داير اضيف حاجه انه بجانب الحوار اتمنى انه تتاح فرصه، يعني في مفهوم جديد. انا طلعت على ورقه قبل شويه، انا حسيت انه المفهوم ده مهم شديد لانه بيساهم في قصه الفساد الموجود في القطاع الاقتصادي، بيساهم في انه اضعاف المؤسسات بتاعتنا، انه بيساهم في انه التنفيذ بتاع السياسات ما يكون اوكي. بتحدث في الاطار ده. شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا دكتور كيمو. the network is poor. المهم للناس اللي فيسبوك يا جماعه، لو انت ما سامع كويس please join us on the clubhouse. join voice of the people forum in the clubhouse. Professor Kon, مرحبا بك يا أخي. It's good to have you tonight. تفضل sir. Welcome. Dr. Kon, you can unmute your mic.
So sorry. I'm trying to unmute it. Assalamu alaikum kulukum. Thank you guys, and it is really good opportunity to have you. And yeah, today I think I'm just part of you as a student of economy and just supporting Dr. Kimo on that area, because I also want to learn more on that front. If anything, I will be supporting around the importance of the political stability, and then I will maybe add the portion of the development piece part of it. But for today, I wasn't prepared to give more lectures around the talk or the speak for today, but. I was invited by Dr. Kimo, and I thought that it's really good opportunity if I can pitch in and also support the dialogue for today. Yeah, so shukran lekum jazilan. كلنا هنكون طلبة بتاع الاقتصاد وندو political space, not political space but economic space لدكتور كيما لأنه هو المتخصص هناك. ما نظام تجنوب إنه هي دكتور متخصص في أي حاجة. أنا دائما فرونت بتاعتي ولو تمشيت مثلا في الأونلاين هتشوف إنه it's mostly political science, sociology and international development. فإن شاء الله لو في أي سؤالات جافة around that area نقدر نساعد. But otherwise we are all today students. Learners of political, and we want to see how our country is moving, politically or progressing. فشكرا.
شكرا جزيلا بروف كون. للمشاهدين لمنصة صوت الشعب فيسبوك ويوتيوب، ناس اللي كانوا they doubting they don't know بروفيسور كون، يا تشوفوا طبعا اللي قاعد قدامكم، وبرضه بتعرفوا دكتور كيمو وانجينير واريلي. خلونا هنا نبدأ في الحلقة بتاعتنا. قبل ما نرجع ندي المنصة لباشمهندس واريلي، أول حاجة أنا داير أشغل حاجة زي 2 or 3 فيديوز عشان ناخذ الفكرة العامة إنه الليلة أنا هنا جايين نتكلم عن شنو وحمية بتاعت المحور اللي بنتكلم فوقه الليلة. خلينا نستمع لفيديو بتاعت في انترفيو شورت أنا قطعته inside story بتاعت الجزيرة. Just let listen.
I'm Rida Fakhri. In a letter that reveals the depth of government corruption, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir is asking more than 75 former and current government officials to return about $4 billion in stolen public money. The president says the credibility of South Sudan is on the line, but he's also promising an amnesty and confidentiality for anyone who returns embezzled funds. Kiir says the government has set up a special bank account in Kenya where officials can deposit the money they took. South Sudan is desperately in need of money. Oil production accounts for 98% of its revenues, but a dispute with the government of Sudan shut down production earlier this year. So a difficult economic situation, further compounded by the fact that documents from the World Bank warned last month of possible state collapse if South Sudan runs out of foreign exchange reserves, which it said could be depleted by July. According to a previously released report by the South Sudanese Auditor General, over $1 billion from oil revenues was unaccounted for during 2005-2006. The Auditor General's report also indicated that for 2 consecutive years, there was no financial reporting of what happened to non-oil revenues that were collected in taxes by the national government or states. Billions more were feared missing between 2007 and 2011. And millions of dollars were reportedly smuggled out of South Sudan in bags across borders to unknown destinations. So who then is to blame for the corruption in South Sudan, and what should be done? To answer these questions, we're joined by Barnaba Mariel Benjamin, South Sudan's Information Minister, who's in Juba. In Washington, Jonathan Temin, Director of the Sudan Program at the United States Institute of Peace. And in London, Professor Paul Moorcraft, Director of the Centre for Foreign Policy Analysis. Barnaba Benjamin in Juba, Salva Kiir says corruption has no place in his government. How is it then that such massive-scale corruption was allowed to go on for so long, even though there was ample sign that it had been taking place for a while?
First of all, let us clear the issue of funds. The issue of funds, this was funds which were related to the purchase of grain strategic reserve, in which over 780 companies were contracted to buy grain in order for strategic reserve. Some of these companies, it is expected that some of them delivered the grains to various states, and other companies were suspected not to have delivered the grain deliveries.
That may account for some of the money, Mr. Benjamin, but we're talking about $4 billion, which could not possibly have gone missing overnight.
Yes, it is not missing overnight. Can I finish what I would like to say to clarify it? That this was meant for grain reserve, which was supposed to go to contracted 780 companies. So the government suspected, because some cases were found to have delivered the grain, others were found not to have delivered. That's why the government created that some senior officials must have cooperated with some of these companies, particularly those bogus companies that did not deliver the strategic grain reserve. That's why the president, through the Anti-Corruption Commission, has written to various senior government officials. And the first thing which was done was sending out forms for declaration of assets to over 5,000 senior government officials throughout South Sudan. And after that, some senior officials were written in case some of these funds, which were meant for the strategic grain reserve, cooperated with some of these companies, that this money was supposed for them to purchase grain. And that's why the president had to send out these letters, not that they were suspecting these officials, but in case some of them must have cooperated and facilitated some of this money to be filtered off to some of these companies. I think that needs to be clarified.
Professor Moorcraft, what do you make? If I can just stop you here for a brief moment. Professor Moorcraft, what do you make of this explanation? By writing a letter like this, can President Salva Kiir absolve himself of ultimate responsibility? Can he take the moral high ground and simply cast the blame on his long-term colleagues?
Well, it'll be interesting to know how much Salva Kiir has in his own bank account. We're not sure about that. A lot of the leaders, so they say in South Sudan, have put money away. But this is damage limitation. What has happened is, in January, the government cut off the oil, 98% of its income, which was absolutely crazy, and suddenly a few months later said, we haven't got any money. And the IMF, as you say, has said that there will be state collapse next month. So suddenly they're saying, right, we need to get money from our old donors, from the EU, from America, but they don't have much money. So this is a public relations exercise. There's been $17 billion, which has gone since 2005 to Juba. Where is it all? There are hardly any roads. It's been spent on arms. So it's been corruption, diversion of money into arms, fat cat guys putting money in bank accounts, and now they're saying pay it back into Kenya, the one country where there's tremendous corruption as well. The whole thing is PR, and nobody's going to be persuaded by this.
Jonathan Temin, who can help Salva Kiir now? He obviously needs help. He sent some 8 letters to heads of states, including the President of the United States. Should he be asking for foreign help, or should he be taking the kinds of decisive action that ensure that this type of massive corruption doesn't take place in the future, and prosecute and hold those who've taken part in this accountable, at the very least?
I think the biggest economic help that South Sudan could get right now would be to strike a deal with Sudan on oil revenue sharing, and those negotiations are just getting underway, resuming in Addis Ababa and Ethiopia. If the oil can get back online using the existing pipelines and there's some sort of sharing deal, that can hugely help the cash flow. And as was just pointed out, they are probably about to run out of cash. To the earlier point, I think the grain scandal is certainly a big part of the corruption story. The estimates I've seen concerning the grain scandal are probably about $2 billion lost. So I don't think that that's all of the story. Clearly there are high levels of...
خلينا نجي في المقطع الأول ده كده عشان بس عشان دايرين نشغل الفيديو ده لكلام اللي قاعد يقوله دكتور كيمو. الروت كورس لازم نرجع للجذور بتاع الأزمة ذاتها في جنوب السودان شكلها شنو. خلينا نستمع للمقطع الثاني ده الفيديو.
Morning, we're prepared to give evidence of massive criminal behavior by the president of South Sudan and by his opposition, the ousted vice president of South Sudan and their generals. The simple fact is they're stealing the money to fund their militias to attack and kill one another. The evidence is thorough, it is detailed, and it is irrefutable. It involves arms dealers, international lawyers, international banks, international real estate. And it is because of these international actors that we are also able to provide solutions to help end this criminal behavior to protect innocent civilians. Since 2014, the U.S. has given $1.5 billion in aid to South Sudan. The United States and the world recognizes that South Sudan cannot become a failed state, not simply because of the humanitarian crisis, but also because we have seen the influences that can take hold in a failed state. We can either take action now or we can spend the next decade mopping up the mess.
Unfortunately, in South Sudan today, war crimes actually do pay. South Sudan leaders no longer take seriously the threats made by the United Nations, by the United States, and others to impose consequences for their behavior. South Sudan's leaders have learned that rape is a war weapon, child soldier recruitment, and mass killings are not enough to trigger any meaningful accountability measures. What's missing is international leverage. And so we consulted widely with banking and finance and policy experts, and we're proposing a new approach to creating immediate and we think unprecedented leverage to counter mass atrocities being committed in South Sudan.
Let's go to the next one.
This is pretty explosive stuff. We're talking about the president and the ousted vice president, along with all their generals, that we're able to prove without any question that not only are they committing these crimes, which they've already been accused of, but that they're profiting off of it.
Immediate family members of President Kiir and his wife have held interests in almost 24 companies operating in oil, mining, construction, gambling, banking, telecommunications, aviation, and government and military procurement. These families of several top officials we examined live in million-dollar mansions outside of the country. They post videos partying in hotels, driving around luxury cars, all while the rest of the people in their country suffer from the consequences of a brutal civil war, and in many places experience near-famine conditions.
نمشي للمقطع اللي بعده.
Bele de magura gidama sana gako sambala biduni sam. Ana gibel kelim kalam de fi kanisa. Hata zadu fi hukuma ina. Meiya makita fawa sansun ma akolo ya jamaa uo itaba akolo beisa. Lainga akolo kulu gurusa sena kulu ba akolo. Gurusa sena uzunus ta senate ta salasika ba akolo ta salamusechwa ba akolo ta salakenisa abunat ba akolo sisarat ba akolo beradat ba akolo yani demasa kan muturan dia besi jede kabasu muturan ma itnin talata sabun bageda akolo
ده muturan bishop انتهينا وقت قصير.
Okay. Honorable, do you have an idea how many Ugandan forces are in South Sudan and how much they are paid to come and bomb our people in the country?
Well, I cannot just give you a number because I may be wrong. But I saw them myself in Juba because I left Juba on April 11.
Okay.
That's when I left Juba. So they are there and they are being paid 100, if I'm not wrong, $100 a day for the Uganda army.
Okay. Who is paying them and where is this budget coming from?
Well, the budget I think come from individual. You know, our money, the they are in the hand of individuals, because even the government, the workers, we have 14 months without even receiving our salaries. So the government, it is the government money. It is on the hand of two people. I cannot mention their name, but everybody in South Sudan know them.
Okay, Honorable Wang, do you, has your resignation letter been accepted? Whom did you send the letter to SOA or the government of South Sudan? Was it accepted and confirmed?
Actually, I sent it. If you read
بس ده المقطع الاول انا كنت دايره من كلام اونربل ديو ممثل بتاع الدائره بتاعت ناصر اللي قدم الاستقاله بتاعه قبل فتره. فيديو انا ماشي نشتغله ده فيديو بتاعت ماري تقريبا الليون دكتور كيمو بكون بتعرفها، هي country director بتاعت World Food Program. Let's listen to her statement قبل 3 يوم.
Hunger still continues to grip the communities and households across South Sudan. South Sudan is now a hunger hotspot of highest concern. Over half the population, 7.7 million people, are in what we call acutely food insecure. They cannot put a meal a day on the table. The country is beset with numerous challenges, whether it's economic crisis, climate change, and rising conflict. Despite the challenges, WFP is here on the ground, hoping to reach 4 million people this year with some form of food assistance. For school meals for children to keep them in school because they are the future of the country. With livelihood support so that people can build back better and be able to feed themselves. And with emergency food assistance and nutrition assistance for all those communities and households.
صوت بتاعه ضعيف، لكن الفيديو أنا شلته من إكس من تويتر. الناس أنا ما أعرف الناس في فيسبوك دول كانوا استمعوا للفيديو ولا ما استمعوا. آخر مقطع بتاع الفيديو أنا نقدر نشغله وبعد ذاك نرجع ندي فرصة لباشمهندس واريلة عشان نرجع للحوار بتاع دكتور كيمو. ده برزنتيشن قدمه واحد طالب بتاع ماجستير بتاع دكتوراه سوري اسمه ماريو برين. كلام ده تقريبا كلام ده كان يوم 12 شهر 5 2025 زمن يعني شهر وشويه من هسه. But let's listen to the presentation وبعد ذاك نمشي لباشمهندس واريلة.
And are deeply interwoven. So we have this principal rivalry between these two gentlemen, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar, that I just mentioned, and this fragile power sharing peace deal, which kind of enshrined this rivalry between these two men in a peace deal, which never really succeeded in really bringing peace to the country, because the rivalry was continued through proxy conflicts at the subnational level in various different instances. And South Sudan is often mentioned really as this classic example of a rentier state that does not depend on taxation for income but on oil revenue, and therefore this accountability mechanism between the citizens of South Sudan and the income and government is pretty much absent, basically. So Salva Kiir always makes sure to really distribute the rents across the elite, his inner power circle, and the current elite is not so much interested in public service delivery, what the government should do and protect its citizens, basically, but really enriching itself quite openly and quite drastically. There's like numerous corruption scandals that have happened, and aid diversion also taking place on a regular basis. So at the same time, then we have like this massive humanitarian needs, and it's a classic dilemma, right? So the international community still decided to, of course, continue aid delivery, but over the decades, it really has become deeply interwoven into the political economy of South Sudan, with also politicians at the local level and the state level trying to influence where aid goes and where it doesn't go, to also influence population movements. IDP camps and refugee sites are also really important sources of revenue, for example, as well as South Sudanese businessmen really deeply kind of benefiting from humanitarian compounds, the rents that humanitarian organizations have to pay for their staff being in Juba, etc. So there's really like a whole political economy that developed around aid delivery in South Sudan. So that's just to say that basically since its independence, the humanitarian situation has been continuously deteriorating. So what we see here is the IPC Food Insecurity and Malnutrition Index by the Integrated Food Classification System, which is principally used by the largest humanitarian organizations such as the World Food Programme to prioritize where they deliver food aid. And we see that over the years the humanitarian situation has not improved but has really worsened. So until 2022, before the war in Sudan broke out, we have already 6.6 million people within South Sudan out of 11.4 million that are highly food insecure. So this IPC scale ranges from 1 to 5, and 3 to 5 are basically really catastrophic levels, which we see here on the map, like being basically orange, red, and dark red, which are instances of famine happening here in the east of the country. So already before the war in Sudan broke out, people were really not doing all too well. But at the same time, what I want to emphasize is that when I traveled to South Sudan and interviewed community representatives, still like people are really experts in surviving. Like they have over decades really developed highly sophisticated strategies to survive in a context of continued insecurity and violence. And this is something that kind of in this humanitarian lingo often gets forgotten, that people have really developed different strategies for resilience and are not like this passive agents that just rely on external assistance, but really make a daily effort to survive and to feed their families actually.
أنا داير أجي هنا خلاص، ده آخر نقطة. وأنا أفتكر دكتور كيمو، باشمهندس واريلا، ودكتور كون، أنتوا أخذتوا يعني بيزك كونسبت نينا جينا من وين. آخر حاجة من الكلام بتاع الطالب بتاع دكتوراه أشار إنه نقطة مهم جدا بالنسبة لي أنا، إنه في زيارته الأخيرة لما مشى جنوب السودان وزار عمل انترفيو، لقى إنه الجنوبيين already they are adopted kind of new mechanism to how to survive within this current situation. That means even Junubin Zar with that situation, they will be resisting the change in South Sudan. وانا ده نقطة انا ده دكتور كيمو واريلا ودكتور كون بعدين تعلقوا فيه. خلينا نرجع ندي منصة لباشمهندس واريلا يشيلنا خلال الانترفيو مع وبعد ذاك نشيل افتر واريلا بنمشي we'll start from there. تفضل باشا.
Okay, thank you, Brother Edward, for the introduction and sharing the videos with the audience. Now, for our audience tonight, we'll manage this conversation in a way that it's first is simplistic. The subject itself may be technical, but we'll try our level best to make it as simple as possible for a layman to have a grasp of it, because we believe that the economy of the country is a subject that of interest and affects everybody, regardless to what you're doing. Economy affects all, so it's incumbent on us to simplify the terminologies and the technical stuff. I will not dwell much on the presentation. There's 4 videos that we have just shared recently. By Brother Edward. I will focus on the subject matter of the room, which is the interview by Rade Tamazic to Dr. Kimo on the June the 20th, 25. The link is up there for if you're interested to look into the details. But in a nutshell, the points that were raised by Dr. Kimo can be summarized as follows. He argued that the main point is that the economy, to fix an economy, the government need to fix the political instability and insecurity. And I think we'll all agree that political stability is important for economic growth and even planning. The second point, which he highlighted in the interview with Rado Tomazic, he warned against the high turnover of public officials in key institutions, including the Central Bank of South Sudan and the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. And he maintained that, or he argued that the short-term time given to these officials will not allow them to plan and implement any policies. And I agree with him totally on that. It's very reasonable that this high turnover will not make anything to implement, to plan or implement any policy. You know, if you look back at the Central Bank of South Sudan from its inception, it had been run by 11 governors since 2005, and on average, the term in office for these governors is less than 2 years. Majority of the governors stay in office for 1 year or less even than 1 year. So starting from Elijah Molok in 2005, I think it's Elijah Molok and Cornelia Koryam. The first two governors had relatively high stay in office, but the rest stay only 1 year or 2 years maximum. So in order, in the order of appointment, first we had Elijah Molok. He stayed for 5 years, so 6 years to 2005 to 2011 during the interim period. Then he was succeeded by Cornelia Koryam from 2011 to 2017. Then after that, the governors that came afterwards, Otto Wajak, only 1 year. Dier Tong had 2 years, approximately 2 years in office. Then came Jamal, less than 1 year. Then came Moses Makur, less than 1 year. Then John Ohise on his first term, less than 1 year. Then James Alec, 1 year or so. Then Ohise again on his second term, 1 year. And now we have a new governor, Addis, who has just resumed office. So the Dr. is saying that this kind of high turnover does not help in institutional building, which I totally agree with him. And I will add also, this does not create the trust needed by stakeholders in the institution itself, especially the business community and other partners. Dr. Kim also warned against political interference in financial institutions, and he argued that this will deepen economic crisis. He might elaborate on that later. But the point that I will like to start off the discussion with Kimo and the other panelists is the issue of liquidity and cash shortages. In the interview with Rado Tomazic, Dr. Kimo said that there is an issue of liquidity. There's shortage of cash, which is SSP in the market, And he further explained that people usually deposit money in banks, commercial banks, based on trust. So if there's no trust, nobody will put his cash in the bank, which is absolutely true. So, and then people expect to get their deposit when they need it. When I put my money in the bank, I expect to get it when I need it to buy stuff. This one I will have some comment on this approach, or more explanation in terms of consumers. Is it just a matter of trust, that they don't trust to put their money in the bank, or the cost of putting money in the bank is actually expensive? In terms of consumer, the public sector employees, the people who work on NGOs, the non-business community. I, having stayed in South Sudan for more than 8 years in the private sector, I can say that the people, the consumers, the South Sudanese themselves, they don't have money to put in the bank at the first place, especially in the recent years. I mean, if public sector is not being paid for over 2 years, so their issue with banking is not an issue of trust. It's an issue of capacity to even, they don't have money to put in the bank. They don't have the luxury of opening a bank account. So this is one point I would like us to put into our discussion. The second related to that is, even when there was cash and the public sector were getting their salaries, their net income per month is far below their needs in a particular month. So if I'm getting like $20 of cash, even in SSP, and my consumption in a month is 10 times, 20 times, 100 times my income, you don't expect me to just go and put money in a bank for the sake of putting money in a bank. Because actually, my money finishes, the cash finishes the moment I get my salary. I consume it, period. I don't need to open a bank account. So these are issues when policymakers frame the diagnosis of the problem of cash and liquidity. They need to look into the disposable income of the people in the country. Do they actually have money? And another thing that needs clarification is, what is the incentive, even if I have some disposable income that I want to put in a bank? Will the bank, the obvious one is, will I get my money if they have it? But also, in South Sudan, at least till I came out of South Sudan, the commercial bank actually charge you for keeping your money in the bank. So why should I put my money in a bank to incur cost? Why can't I just put it under my pillow? Why should I be paying for checkbooks and paying for an ordinary current account? I get charged for it. I haven't seen that in any banking industry in other countries. So these are, for me, these are structural issues beyond the banking sector. It's more of the economy and how the economy operates. So moving forward, Dictor also mentioned the fact that central banks requires commercial banks to maintain a certain portion of consumers' deposits at all times. This is just him expanding on one of the questions asked, the role of the central bank and how they relate to commercial banks. And I think it's important because we kind of mix the role of the central bank with commercial banks, and central banks should be focusing on policy, monetary policy in specific. And monetary policies, they have tools that they use to manage it, the cash flow in the economy through either interest rates or supply of money in the market. But at this also my point that I want to register here in terms of which is my question of the day, which I will put to Dr. Kimo. Where is the cash? Well, you argued that the issue of liquidity in the financial sector is a matter of SSP being out of the banking sector. Okay, I understand that, but we need to drill down to which sector is keeping SSP outside the banking sector and why. I think there are two sides of the argument. And first, from the consumer side, like I said, I disqualify the argument of the ordinary consumer, the people who have personal accounts, people who work for the government, people who work for NGOs, as I will argue that they don't have that luxury, like I've stated before. But I think the biggest chunk of the SSP circulates within the business community. The traders. The traders, they manage a bulk of the SSP, and their issue with trust with the bank, with commercial banks, has several levels. I'm talking on behalf of as a person who has been in that business community, and I understand the issue we have with commercial bank and even the central bank. So that why are the traders not putting their cash in the bank? Any trader would like to put money in the bank because the transactions are all bank related, right? But I think the biggest issue of trust here, Dr. Kimo, is more of the trust between the commercial banks and the central bank. All these commercial banks in South Sudan, they keep traders' money. But when it comes to them depositing this money in the central bank, there's an issue of trust because the system is not designed to create trust between commercial banks and the central bank. The current governor, I've heard, I've read recently, he came up with some policy direction that essentially part of it is to talk about, to change the requirement for retaining cash in commercial banks. And a question that begs answer is, when the government cannot pay salaries, when the government cannot pay salaries? Is it a matter of liquidity or a matter of finance? I mean, liquidity in a sense. If there were liquidity in these banks, if there were cash in these banks, and these banks, commercial banks, only retain a certain amount for their operational day-to-day operation, I think now it's capped at 20%, and the rest of the money should go in and be banked with within the central bank. That's theoretically what we learn in business school or in economics. Now, if the government has deficit in financing any budget, the government can then get loan from internal loan from what is there in the bank. But when the government wants to pay salaries and it can't even get internal loan because there is no cash, the issue is bigger than just that there is trust between consumers and the banking. So, the consumers needs assurance that they should have withdrawal, which I've already spoken about that, and also banks need assurance from the central bank that the central bank can provide cash when needed. Now, this Dr. Kimo and all the brothers and sisters in the room, the fact of the matter is, for me, as Warele, with my humble knowledge and experience, what we have is an issue, structural issue. Some questions are not being asked and nobody dares to answer. Do we have reserve? Do we, as a country, have a reserve, say, foreign Forex reserve under the management of the central bank? Do we have it? Or are we still, is the government still keeping hard currency in foreign countries, and they only tapped into it when they need it, like we used to do during the interim period when Stambik used to Stambik Bank used to bank our hard currency. So if this is the trend that is going on, if the hard currency reserve or the loans that we are getting is not housed by the central bank and is kept in an account in Uganda somewhere, then this hard currency only benefits the reserve build up or the hard currency reserve of the host country, which is Uganda or Kenya or South Africa or whatever. Because if you don't have this reserve and you're putting it in some other country, then automatically it affects the balance sheet of that country, not yours, even if it's your money. So just to end this point here, I would like an answer from, or at least an explanation from Dr. Do we have a reserve, a hard currency reserve that is kept in South Sudan? This is something that we'll explain. We'll open it with a fruitful discussion. Last point before I hand the mic is about to round out this issue of stability. The talk of political stability. I would like to connect it to stability in terms of Forex. The Forex, the policies that the regime the central bank has experimented over time. For the economy, for the business community, for people who does transactions, besides the political stability, is paramount that the exchange rate should be stable. It's very important that exchange rate is stable over time. It can be up, it doesn't matter, but at least stability, when it's stable, it is predictable. And business people like to predict. So if you have a regime, a Forex regime that is not trustworthy for investors, whereby it is managed through a system that is apparently corruption, I will put it bluntly, I'm referring to this system of auction. The way hard currency is being put into the market through a third party, and they call it auction, through these same banks. This, for me, is a major policy, poor policy, that have led the pound to hike from 2.3 to now, I don't know, 600 something. Now, if you have this poor policy of auctioning and forex management, automatically it depletes the pound. So, a simple example: £4 in 2005. What you buy with £4, now you need £600 to buy the same item. So what it means is you need to print more money. So I think these are the issues that apparently with time has built up, and we have reached a point whereby the government does not know where the money is, and they cannot use the traditional monetary tools for managing cash flow within the economy to manage the economy, because the economy was not structured in a way that every country structures it. No control over banking of where our hard currency are. Some currencies are stored in other countries. No control over the commercial banks. Some commercial banks, they don't even meet the minimum requirement of capital requirement that they should have to open a bank. They just open a bank. There's issues of trust between the commercial banks and the central bank, whereby the commercial banks are not confident to deposit money that they don't need for their operation in the central bank, because somebody will just come with a truck and take the cash from the central bank. So I will stop at here so that I give chance to Victor to explain more on the interview and also the other points that I've raised. Then we'll pick it up from there. So, Brother Edward, thank you very much, and Dr. Kimo, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Engineer Warili, for your elaborate discourse. I think you have raised some straightforward questions, and you made several comments. I want to start in a reverse order. I hope people will remember what you were talking, or I can start from the beginning. Okay, you are referring to the need for political stability in order to ensure economic stability, or even to implement some economic reforms. That is very true. But apart from political stability, as I said, there is a concept, I will talk about it later. But to me, the major problem is political interference. Okay, as you put it, and as I put it also in the interview, and let's just have some even the instability. You try to indicate how long some of the governors stayed, and as I said earlier, the CPA era, which was between 2005 and 2011, was more stable because we experienced only 2 governors. And the average, our colleague and friend, Dr. Patel, shared some 4-page article about this issue. And he got some statistics that the average for that period was about 68.5 months, which is in line with the Act of the Bank of South Sudan. As I mentioned, when the governor is appointed, has a certain term in office, almost 5 years. And this is a contract. The same thing applies to the first deputy governor and the second deputy governor. They don't have the same term of office. The first deputy governor has less, and the second has less than the first. The idea is to avoid any vacuum in the management of the bank. 2017 to 2020, the average was 15 months. Between 2020 up to 2025, the average was 10 months. And if you look deeply, between 2024 and 2025, that was the worst period. The average time was 6 months. So if you ask yourself, what can you do in 6 months? Literally nothing. And this affects, leave alone the stability on the part of the government, it affects the institutions in terms of institutional memory, right? If you chase people away in a very short time, nobody will have any memory about the operations, the guidelines, the values, the operations of the bank. The fundamental question that we should be asking, why these guys have been removed? And I think before I answer that question, to me, the same thing also applies to the Ministry of Finance. They face the same problem, and the two of them are supposed to manage the economy, whether the physical or the monetary part. In most cases, the governors are removed simply because they don't comply with the request from the executive, especially the office of the president. And the overall issue is that if you go back to 2012, when we had an issue with Sudan about the fees for the pipeline and the transportation, and we decided to shut down the oil for about 9 months, and then we entered into the austerity measures during the former Minister of Finance, Kimo Adiebo. That is the time South Sudan started experiencing deficits in the budget. During the CPA era, we didn't have deficits, so we didn't have issues. The problem started after independence. And as Engineer Warili said, the government is faced with a couple of options how to finance deficit. And if we are following the government resorted to borrowing internally from the commercial banks. And up to now, some commercial banks have not been paid their money. And they tried externally, and some of us are following the case with the Qatari National Bank. They are in court now because the government did not honor its promises. And externally, because of our situation, nobody was giving us unless against the oil reserves, and also with some of the companies that are investing in the oil industry, especially the Chinese, because they had a lot of capital and they had to give the government. Okay? So the whole issue is that when a governor fails, because that the only option now was for the Minister of Finance, in order to bridge the deficit in their financing, is to force the central bank to print more money. Give the Ministry of Finance to pay the salaries, to pay the other expenses. Most of the governors who could not comply were removed. And I mentioned in the interview the case of the former governor, Honorable Utom Rak, and I met him in his office and he was panicking. And I asked him, what's the problem? He said, the office of the president. I said, what's wrong? He said, they want money. I said, how much? They said they need $4 million US. And you could ask yourself, what do they want to do with the money? And he said, I had only 3.5 million and I don't know what to do. So he headed to the office of the president where they were meeting. And in the end, he was challenged. And they told him, if you cannot give us money and if you cannot control inflation, why should we keep you as a governor? Believe it or not, he was removed the same day in the afternoon. And part of the pressure, the issue of printing, addressing the deficit, financing through printing more money, is partly responsible for the inflation in the country. Okay? So this is a major problem. The issue of political stability is very, very important. Okay? Now, you said something about the Forex bureaus, and I can tell you that time I was still a member of the board of directors. And I remember very well, for a Forex bureau to be open, they were required to pay $600,000 US. And I can tell you, even those who decided to transform their Forex bureaus into banks, some of them did not pay up the capital up to them. And that is a huge risk which affects the whole financial system. To me, I can say most of the commercial banks were foreign, most of the Forex bureaus, part of them were foreign, part of them were national. But what was the main driving force? All of them were interested in the dollar. They didn't have real intention to invest or to do real business. Go to any commercial bank, look at their budget. How much loans have they been giving out to businesses? Almost nil. Because if they were giving loans, they would have gone back to the central bank in order to also get loans. That is why the interest rate cannot be used as a tool by the central bank, because nobody is borrowing from anybody. The business people only, mostly the foreigners, especially they go through the locals, especially if you have a land, you sign a lease, then the foreigner will take the lease and then they get the loan from the commercial bank. Okay, again, they use the land lease as collateral. Okay, so again, the auctioning of the dollar, and we want, some of us talk against this policy, and we said this is one way of siphoning our wealth, our resources outside the country. And this is exactly what was happening. those commercial banks, those Forex bureaus who were participating in those auctions and they were getting dollar, they were not using it for the purpose for which they asked for the loan. The intention was to give other business people who need dollar because they don't have any direct contact with the central bank. So the only means is to go through commercial banks or to go through the Forex bureaus. And partly because the central bank didn't have, and up to now, I don't think they have the mechanism, they don't have the capacity to monitor the auction dollars. So most of the time, the policy is defeated because the intention is to pump more dollar into the economy such that it lessens the pressure on the SSP, and as a result, it leads to stability of the value of the domestic currency, which is the SSP, and automatically leads to stability of the exchange rate, as you said. It is very important. Okay? You were asking about where do they keep the dollar, for example. I mean, it's a normal practice, especially when you have crisis in the country, when you don't have the capacity for safety, keeping your dollar safe, you can put it in other banks. Of course, they will charge you some interest, but the problem is what happens when that money is brought. I'm talking about the dollar here. Mainly we're using dollar, not a pound sterling or any other foreign currencies. Okay, so we have heard stories that we cannot verify that the plane will land at Juba International Airport, and some institutions, powerful ones, will take money even before the money being taken to the central bank, before being recorded into their books. Okay, so it vanishes from there. Another aspect of political pressure, okay? As I mentioned in my interview with Raju Tamazi, what happens is that for the commercial banks, the central bank is the lender of last resort. And for the government, it is the custodian. It keeps its money. Okay? And most of the ministries, major ones, have their accounts with the central bank. And at the same time, by law, commercial banks, as part of risk mitigation, they are required to keep certain amount, usually percentages. They were required like 20% of the deposit of the depositors without categorization with the central bank when they run into any issue or whenever they ask, because they keep part of their money apart from the deposit. They also keep their money for safety reasons. They keep them with the central bank. What happens, as I said, the mistrust becomes cyclical, becomes a cycle. Okay, and as you put it, the starting point was with the central bank. The central bank could not honor its obligations toward commercial banks. They used to prioritize requests under pressure from powerful government institutions, and that was at the expense of the commercial banks. And when they go back with no money, and then the depositors would come asking for the money, they don't find the money. So the cycle of mistrust is completed, and then now any stakeholder will take whatever measures. Okay? And the impact will be on the central bank, on the whole economy. Depositors will refrain from bringing money to the commercial banks, keep them anywhere. The same thing, commercial bank will refrain from taking their money to the central bank, and it completes the cycle. You see, When the Ministry of Finance raised the issue of cash shortage, they were not talking about the public. They were not talking about the public. They were talking about government institutions. They were talking about government employees. And what we need to know from statistics, only 15% of the population of South Sudan are employed by the government. Only 15%. So you can imagine, and you can ask yourself, how about the 85%? And as you put it, sometimes it is a requirement by some institutions, whether government or even some organization, they would require their employees to facilitate the payment of their salaries, for example. They will be required to open bank accounts, and then your money is transferred to your account. If I have a bank account, and this is what I'm wondering, and I was wondering what the Minister of Finance was talking about. If I have a bank account, why would you issue me a check? I don't need a check. The money is automatically transferred to my bank, like what we have here. If you want to go and withdraw cash, you withdraw cash. If you want to write a check for anybody else, for any transaction, you write your check. So money is there. I was wondering, why would the Minister of Finance issue checks? As some people commented in social media, that was a tricky way. And even if we look at the rules governing public finance or public financial management, one of the requirements is that before you issue any check, make sure, one, the item or the request is budgeted, and then it has cash. And by the way, for your information, this was the situation before 2013, before the eruption of the war. The international community helped the Minister of Finance and other institutions to streamline payment, especially when they were having these issues of ghost names in the pay sheets. They streamlined this process and to make automation. And everything was done through the internet, it is an automated process. And unfortunately, our people decide to destroy that, to create loopholes, to enhance their corruption practices. With that system, even if you are the governor, the director general, or you are in charge of approval of payments, the system will not allow you to approve such an amount before making sure that the item is budgeted and there are funds. And that's why many people would go to Minister of Finance, and is partly responsible for the Dura saga, because we refuse to follow systems, because we want to continue our corruption practices. That's why we ended up where we are, okay? To me, taking your money is not mandatory, but some institution would require that. For the category of people Engineer Waril was talking about, sometimes you take your money for safety reasons. And we have heard stories of many criminals broke into some houses and they have stolen their money. That will give you terrible signal. Even if you are keeping a certain amount of money, you fear for your life. So you may have to take, assuming that you have money, you take to the commercial bank. Okay? So even if you are in the subsistence, you can still take your money. Now, I think I should be resorting to the last question. It was not the last in your series. Where is the cash? Okay? Where is the cash? And as you put it, those will bulk amount are those in the business sector. And to me, these are the people who are controlling the cash. These are the people influencing the exchange rate, apart from other factors. I can elaborate on the factors that would determine the exchange rate if you want. Okay? It's the same cycle. These people became more innovative, they have to find ways of keeping their money. Okay, and that's why in some places, I mean, I don't need to say where, you will find like a place is partitioned into 3 parts. The front part of it is the shop. The second part is, just 1 second, okay. The second part is where they live, and then the last part is where they keep their money, because they don't want any disruption for their business. Okay? So to me, these are some of the factors that brought us where we are, and if you are interested, let me know. If you want to know why, what are the factors that affect the exchange rate, I can talk about that. But I don't know, at some point, I just wanted to speak about what we call the rolling door concept, and how it is applicable in our case, and what are the possible implications. And if we are seeking remedies, we can also suggest some. Okay, I think I leave it here. Maybe if there are other questions, and I'm ready for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Victor. We have Kon and Odise. If they have any interjection at this point, we'll let them in a minute. I would just like to add a perspective of the practices of how the business community operates. I know our officials, they don't understand. You know, most of the businesses in South Sudan are dealing with export and import. So it's critical for them to be monitoring the exchange rate. So the practice in the market is they do the exchange day by day. Like any sales, any daily, before they close the day, the SSP that is collected by that day, they automatically transfer it to dollar to avoid the shocks that happens in the Forex. So take a hotel. If assuming that the hotel is not charging upfront in hard currency, if they are forced to charge in SSP, the collection of the day, at the end of the day, they have an informer or an agent in the so-called black market, and they collect the money, the income for that day, and they exchange it automatically to dollars, because they cannot predict tomorrow how the exchange rate will behave. So that's how the strategy traders, business people used in all the industry, be it in the cement industry, hospitality industry, the fuel industry. That's what they do. They don't bank. They don't bank SSP, because that will be a liability. You don't know the value will depreciate. So you just transform this SSP at the end of the day into dollars, and then you put the dollars in the account, because you know that the dollar is stable. That's just an addition on that. Kono or Dise, if you have any questions at this point, before we move on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Aurel, and everybody in the room. Yeah, it is just like disturbing listening to all the videos and all the comments from Professor, and also all the question that you have raised, Aurel. It's just like I'm puzzled like where to start. But the only things in theory that comes to mind here in general is that the primary responsibility of preventive action always rests with the state, both through their national policy and their governance of the multilateral system. So that's only thing that comes to mind always. Like when people take governments to want to be part of the governments, I don't know what would they thinking. Like they just want to be there for other purposes, or they are there actually to implement, this theories that will actually help in improving the welfare of their of their society or of their people. Even within the international community, they tried everything else. They tried to support the dictatorship. They tried to support any kinds of government that comes up in those, especially within the global south. But at the end, they are talking to them. They say that states are called upon with each, to be able to work at least with each others and with other actors to keep their countries on the path of the peace. Meaning, you will not be able to sustain a state. Not only government. Government is not everything, as all the governments in global south in particular think of themselves as the gatekeepers, the gods, or the main power and sovereign. The authority of the sovereign nation. It is the actors that within your states are the most important, pillars that you always need to work with. You need to ensure the use of the today and how they would become the leaders of the future. You want to take care of your women of today and how they will become, the women of the future. You have to have vision through your governance system, through your national policy to see how the country will look like 10 years from today. So it is not just the easiest thing as we think of as I have this muscle here about the V8. Al-Junubin always they think that country the V8, you just get the new one, you don't change the oil, and then all of a sudden V8 bitatakara, lisa fi hala jade. And this is what is happening with us now. We had the V8, which is the country that calls South Sudan, with all the national resources, with all the good people that is now being categorized as the wild people in the world. And then when I think of the word wild or the warriors or people who just like to fight, I don't see it in any South Sudanese communities that I have known or those who I have grown up with. The whole things will come back to the type of national policy that we have now and the type of the governance system that we have now in place that nobody even theoretically are able to define. Okay, so those are the things that come to mind when I'm listening to all the presentation that you have been sharing. Also, another theory that will come is that exclusion from the access to power, opportunities, services, and security create fertile ground for mobilizing group grievances to violence, especially in areas with weak state capacity or legitimacy. Okay. So we can always talk like في مشكلة security, في مشكلة poverty, في مشكلة the whole things that always affect our welfare within the state or within the country. But again, if we are just avoiding to talk on issues as simple as the exclusion of power, the inclusivity, the opportunities, the services, the security, all these will affect the other pillars, economic, political, and social pillars. And this is why I took you blood. When we go to details of it, you are a little bit focus, in details. Also, there is a need then to suggest specific ways in which state and other actors can seek to avoid violence, including through more inclusive policies. Okay. So, Junub Sudan amalna ya kalas. Nas karabna, shakalna, nas kotolobat, ohasa. Al-Hukuma is not looking for those policies now, national policies, or even governance system. Everybody's just thinking I'm in the position, and they have time to it. They call it kursi. So like bishil kursi bitati, then kaleji shil kursi. Okay, and then other people are resorting now to how to shield this kursi through the power. So instead, marhala kalas for our wisest, even within the governments or within our intellectual arenas or academicians, It is this time now that we should find another way to bring up inclusive policies. It is a mazak that we can explain it in different theories. We can explain it in different languages. We can different in different disciplinaries, interdisciplinary approach to it. But we're not going to get out of it. It is a mess now. We need a clear, specific, inclusive policies so that we can, come out of this mess. In the concept of Dr. Adwok will say the total transformation. And then again, with this current situation, also the total transformation need, resistance, kind of, to lead there. But if there is any other policies that will get us out of there, will be another best option. Again, we talk about the gross poverty alleviations. Those are crucial, but alone will not be enough to sustain peace. And then even if you brought them peace, you took the poverty away, and you are still not inclusive, this is not going to be enough. Okay. So then preventing violence, departing from traditional economics and social policies when risks are building up or are high, what the subsidy, and then we'll say, oh, we're going to bring ball mail, and then people are starting discussing ball mail, Omar, Hayefi, there, what the ways, what it's not about that. It is about just like Khalas, Mosogonas Beishesh Fiedo. You just need another way of getting out of the where you are at now. And you cannot do it alone. Either the person Nas Gadin Bufakuru Hatariga Bes Alea or Aladai, or Umadenia Godu, Ala Kursida, Ala Zen, Mahal Tasaram Hussein, if we use it as an example, until the country is totally gone. Okay. So, the best, I will not say the best, but things of the way forward, you can look at the means to seek inclusive solution through dialogue, adaptation. Professor Kimo of the microeconomic policies, the national reform in core state functions, and distributive policies. Ikun hajat al alternative lesla ushakala wahapala nina karin kalma forward. Or also maintaining powers, and the other social aspect of it. Sudan is not only militarism, but also there is cultural part of it, which is like tribalism, ethnicity, regionalism, and all this other aspect. We also need inclusive decision making, which is very fundamental to sustain peace at all levels, as are long-term policies to address economic, social, and political aspirations that shape the of Sudan. Also, fostering participation of young people, as well as the organizations, movement, and networks that represent them, very, very crucial. You educate people who are makulu zol al der yasa lay hukuma da maga be jiblena mustashfa da zol muarid lazim yakulu fasikinu yaktulu makulu zol al bugul ya jamaa fi tariqa kweza nina mumkin nazorobo, or let us use al oil bitatna de badam nadkhulu fi juyub qali nazorobo no fuel agricultural sectors bitatna ashan dola bitatna yakun dola qawi da zol muarid yadkhulu fasikinu wala yaktulu. Okay, makulu zol hatta zol al zayl bardo shal salah zol batal ولسه ممكن الناس يستفيدوا من اجهزه بتاعته ويجيبوا يكونوا قاعد مع ناس يجيبوه في اجهزه في kind of inclusive dialogue to see what can we benefit from those ideas. وزي ما قلنا قبل this idea of inclusivity كانت حلته في مرحله inclusive governance او political space. كل زول بقول كلام بتاعته بقوله قبل ما يشيل سلاح كانت حلته هناك، لكن حاسه خلاص بقى دي مرحله انت قاعد تواجهه. So we shouldn't go ahead to continue the same path. Okay. Again, usually, especially for our Western perspective in academia, we always encourage women's meaningful participation in all aspects of peace and security. which is very critical to effectiveness, including in the peace process, where it has been shown to have direct impact on the sustainability of agreement reached. But then كمان مش women اللي ده نجيبهم بس عشان يمثلوا idea بتاع الراجل يقول انت ماشي في الميتنج مش يقولوا من كده ولا ما تسمع للجماعه دي لان الجماعه دي ما من جماعتنا, they are not our colleagues or they are not part of our political platform, our paradigm. They don't think like us. It is inclusive women that comes from all the sectors of the society that are able to work together, that also empower. يقدروا يشتغلوا ويقدروا يستفيدوا الدولة. مثل an example that I can use parliament بتاعت رواندا الحاسة بقى فوقه very active women القام بيشاركوا effectively في nation building process في رواندا. Okay, they had like some challenges لما نومن بدو جداد, لكن also Well, we mentioned something about the governance system, national policy. Jabo national policies, governance system, albekali women to be respected within all these institutions. Okay. أنا ما بمشي كثير أنا بجيب هنا بس ده حاجات discussions بتاع أنا قاعد أسمع من قبل وحاجات اللي قاعد بحصل just came to me to share this by some policy perspectives. كان في حاجة تانية we'll just add some more as we go. Thank you so much.
Dr. Kon, before we move forward, أنا داير أضيف حاجة. I want you to add something. Last week, أننا كنا بنتكلم إنه how can we fight the tribalism in South Sudan, and also is the problem the tribes or the problem is actually the elites? Those are actually running the country. Dr. Kimo also can mention إنه the official will be able to address الحاجة ده Dr. Kon. So I want you to make a comment because in context of taking the country back on the drawing board based on Kalam Elite Samitu for discussion with Aralela. So what are you telling? How can you answer that? Thank you.
Yeah, this is really good question, Brother Edward. الموضوع بتاع tribalism in particular I will say like let us use Africa all as a model. First, this concept was used effectively by colonialism first. The colonials used it very effectively as a means of divide and rules, and also when they left, they use it for drawing the border to ensure that Africans are not coherent society. They shouldn't be able to to live as one people. For decades to go. Oman fell and like they really succeeded of doing that. فايدة لاحظتها أنينا جيل بتاع ستينات سبعينات أنينا لاحظتها كان في harmony في societies بتاعتنا, and harmony is there. main pillar بتاعته كان traditional leadership. لو كان ماسك الجلود the harmony بتاعت South Sudanese societies of which أي زول كان بيحترم الفيليج اللي جاي منه وال the rulers بتاعت السلطان بتاعتهم والملوك بتاعتنا كان بيحترموا ما دوم احترام كبير خالص. شفت حتى colonialism the same thing, they depended on those leadership, traditional leadership عشان يحصلوا على حاجات زي taxations and also to bring peace, conflict resolutions. They were depending on those people. فده بديك good hypothesis إنهم إحنا جنوبيين أننا ما الناس بقرأوا بعضنا أصلا. المشكلة بتاعتنا هو past بتاعت history that we have gone through and then the consequences by a product of it. Through struggle بتاعتنا مع شمالين برضو انت عندك insurgency, counter insurgency, دخلنا في مشاكل بتاعت regionalism, دخلنا مشاكل بتاعت قبلية وده. then علينا نقول ده ناس منو political elites. شفت so simple to lead that to political elites. انت كان شفت like intercommunal fightings. انا في عندي articles برضو on intercommunal. انت بتشوف برضو regardless of resources scarcity الناس قام بيشاكلوا فوقه always ناس believe those are the intellectuals. But the so-called, it is unfair to use the word intellectuals, but And political elites within those societies, usually they are the one leading all this disharmony and Basel Band societies. The same thing has the governance in general, or the political system that we have in place. Al-Jab tribalism, it is the political elite, Al-Jo, and then they define the country the same way Al-Muslim kan Shamalin define the country fi Shamal Zaman. Yeah, and then they want to take over or to classify the whole country as, belong to their ethnicity, for example, or belong to their religion, or, and come on, it should have a concept that African politics through the concept that the African elections, for example, political parties and all this. Those are the faster approach that political elite or ethnic political elite, let us add the word ethnic political elites always use as a political paradigm. Because in the political system, always, if you are running for an office, you want a political card to actually mobilize people to be able to vote for you. And the political part, in the West, usually they call it political paradigm, whether it is liberal paradigm, for example, or conservative paradigm, and then fuel or mobilize people on the strongest threat that will make people actually vote for you, because if they don't vote for you, there is something that will happen to them. There is consequences if you didn't vote for them. So in many cases that you will see, Bashir, for example, in Sudan, they will say, itulu kaletu ninamshi, then ana hadukunu akaru Arab nahkumu fi Sudan. And then fi Junub Sudan yقولوا مثلا لو شالوا كير برا خلاص نديك في قطر, for example. Or لو حصل حاجة للرياض then الناس يكونوا في قطر. These are just political cards, usually utilized by political elites to fuel concepts within the society. But في 5 كيرة يمشي ولا 10 كيرة يجي بعدنا وكلنا نكونوا معفشين ده في 100 ريال تاني هيجي ويمشي بعدنا. All this will lead to simple concept that political elites are the one mobilizing tribalism or asserting tribalism, concept of tribalism and tribal paradigms within the societies. Example al-Basit, Munu kan bukut for us, for example, Eno, Rwanda, for Yom and Alayam, who to Tutsi Bagdad issue from Al Wahid, we have no bullet saw. Finas Bigul Muslim, the other theory Bigul, oh, this is just temporary, political settlement that will end with the end of Kagame. Okay, here is the dispute part of it. Is a Kagame giver? Because to create generations, you need at least 22 years. 20 to create new generation. If Kagame succeeded to create generation that respect each others from the time that he built that country, created a generation that respect each others, respect their communities. They look at themselves as nation of one country. They overlook the concept of their tribe and where they came from. They critically think about how colonialism defined them and made them, delay their progress for all these years. Da Gilda, namanimshi legidam kan Kagame fi wala mafi, man bamshu gidam be new ideas. Again, narjak fi kalama lala kutabadat bomin bidaya muhadara bitati. Preventive measure like that always rests with the state. Al-Hukuma al-state be governance bitato kulu. Hama haja fogu national policy. National policy ya nze constitution alasa maidi na laadi yo malela fi Junub Sudan da mishkala kabir khalis. Those constitutions they are mukun kudu fogu hajat katir al-bisaidna ashan namshu legida. We can corrupt, if you work against those policies, what will happen to you and who will protect you? Umunu, Zil Mohamed, Wukuda, al-Doctor Saidun, and Nafa Muajada Quest, because if we cross it ما في زول بقدر بساعدك ما في حقوق ما في قبيله بتاعتك بقدر بساعدك في مال ده اوكي وانينا دايرين governance كويس through multilateral system بتاعته كان ده بوليس كان ده سجون كان ده شنو ما في زول تاني بمشي ولا دامي مسكوا وانا بعرف ولا دامي تاني جنرال بيجي بالطلعه ولا في منو في راوند ده حسب ما في حاجه زي عشان كده اي زول بدور لاني سبا ما زول بابشا لانه كان ابشو ما في ولا دمك ما في ولا خالك بقدر يطلع معلش التوبيك ده بس عشان like it's very hard انا بقيف هنا عشان كان في ناس تاني داخلوا ولا دايرين يسالوا سؤال تاني فده الحاجه بس in conclusion بتاعته it is social construction the concept of tribalism.
ممكن اقول حاجه؟
تفضل دور بروف.
انا يعني ثانك يو فيري ماتش بروف كون. يعني الفكره بتاعتي يس هسه انت زي اديتنا خطوط عريضه، لكن انا ماي ريكوست انه تخشوا في حوار مع نسيد. صراحه التوبيك ده مهم، يعني احنا نخصص له حلقه كامله عشان نقدر نناقش وننور المستمعين بالموضوع ده. شكرا.
ده نفس الحاجه الداير في راسي. تعرف يا ادوارد عشان وفوكس في الماده اللي احنا بنتكلم فوقه واكزوستد، then لو في ضروره ممكن we can talk about the other topics or we can create another room عشان نكون focus. I think that will
كلام جميل. move forward.
طيب انا قبل بس انا جيت انا داير اعمل شويه كومنت كده، بعد ذاك انا بدي فرصه للمداخله بتاع ديسا. اولا قول you mentioned something about I think about holistic approach the management or our views out to the economy. It's not only central bank, and I agree with you. أنا في 101 بتاع economics لو دونا لو the basics قالوا لنا إنه يا أخي the role of any economic manager the state is to make sure that the cash keeps on flowing. My gift, the cash flows from commercial banks to central banks to the government to consumers. You have to make it circulating. The cash has to be circulating. Now, what we have here, which is the main issue that the state is facing, is that there is an issue of stagnation, an issue of liquidity. Liquidity is stuck somewhere, and with the current state apparatus, the design of the state, it's proving difficult to manage, to push this cash, because the systems were not designed in the proper way, and that is my focal argument in all this discussion, that the state cannot manage cash flow because the system itself was not designed to facilitate the traditional tools of management to be effective. So this is on الحاجة دي بعد ما after this round I would like also Dr. Kimo to give an insight for the recent policy direction by Addis, which he talked about reducing commercial bank rate, interest rates, so that will come to it at the second phase. Second phase of the discussion. But to end my submission, my comment hasa, في كلام قالوا دكتور كيمو جبال, the commercial banks, they are not focused on doing business within the traditional business model of a bank. I repeat, the banks in South Sudan, their business model is different than banks in other countries. What I mean by that is a bank in any country, its business model, its income streams are generated from charges on loans, service charges, be it you have a current account, a saving account, checkbooks, and all this. And also they make some money from Forex. These are the income streams for any bank, any commercial bank, in any country. Now, in South Sudan, because of these structural issues, the bank's business model is different. They are focusing on one item that is making them millions of dollars in their balance sheet and ignoring the other services because the regulation and the structure of the banking system does not require them to do that. That's why the loans, commercial loans are not there, are not the main income stream of a bank. Even service charges, this is not the main income stream. The main income stream is Forex. This is where they make money. This is where the Kenyan banks, for example, the KCB, for so many years, they have turned their balance sheet into positive, even compensating for the losses that they make in other countries like Burundi, just because the Forex business in South Sudan is so lucrative. So this structural issue, even if the central bank manager, the current one, comes out with the idea of introducing lending rate to consumers, theoretically, in reality, it's not there. Money circulation, the central bank will give interest rate, which I think now they are talking about 12% to commercial banks. They lend money to commercial banks so that the commercial banks then lends it to businesses. That's how quote and unquote growth is influenced. So the government through the central bank gives loans to commercial banks at a lower rate and then directs the commercial banks to facilitate loan facilities to the business community with some at a rate that is a bit higher. This is an issue that with this business model that I've talked about, regardless to the theories that Addis Ababa will put there, Addis will put there, the system will not flow because the commercial banks never gives, they give loans to businesses in a way that is not at higher rates. Like you'll get in South Sudan, you'll get business, if you're lucky, if you're connected, you can get loans at like interest rate of 20%, 25%, at times even 50% of interest rate. Now, if you compare that to the regional average, even of commercial banks, central banks, like Kenya, like Uganda, officially, the Central Bank of Kenya and Uganda, they are giving the interest rate to commercial banks is 9.7. So we have been operating above the average in terms of cost of money, supply of money. So these issues, I mean, if we are not serious, for me, the regime is not serious, to be frank. They are not serious in managing the monetary policy nor the fiscal policy in a way that is competitive, leave alone that will, in a way that will encourage economic activity. They're not serious. Because if they were serious, they have to look at their competitor, what the Central Bank of Kenya is doing, what the Central Bank of Uganda is doing, because you're in a competition here. If your lending rate in the country is higher than the region, then automatically investors go to countries that have lower lending rates in their commercial banks. That is, if we have reached that point of using interest rate as a tool for enticing people to borrow or encouraging commercial banks to facilitate loans to business communities. So that I will stop here. Odise, go ahead, make your comments and your observation. Shukran.
Okay, I hope I'm audible. First of all, greetings to you guys. It's a privilege to be with you guys here again. Yeah, I have some questions. I think some of you guys, most of you, have highlighted crucial points, and these crucial points are very important especially for the audience and for all those who are interested and also connected with some understanding on the economic issue of South Sudan. The thing that made me raise a big question here was the reform, the idea of reform itself. And if we define reform and compare it with transformation, there's many things that I've noticed that in South Sudan condition, the argument would be is that South Sudan have, like some of the politicians who I've heard them, who came even in this platform many times, have spoken this message, says that it is too deformed to be reformed. So if the economic of South Sudan is completely in shambles, do you think this reform has a meaningful context when it comes to underlying structure? I think also to add on other question that is, what's the underlying assumption about South Sudan's economy and society, especially that underpins the idea of economic reform, if not transformation? And are these things, these assumptions still valid? I hope my question is clear for the two gentlemen, in particular the two guests, and if also anyone else, Brother Urele and Edward want to also interject on answering that. Thank you.
Okay, Doctor, Dr. Kimo, you can chip in and tackle that question.
Yeah, معلش ممكن نكرر السؤال شوية كده عشان أنا ما فهمت السؤال, like I didn't get it.
Okay. Do you want to repeat it or should I rephrase what you just repeat the question?
Oh yeah, if you can rephrase it, no problem. Yeah, if you can rephrase it, that'd be great. I was going to repeat, but go ahead. If you rephrase it, that's even excellent because it might even shorten my question.
You just say it again.
All right. ممكن ذاته بدي السؤال الثاني ده باللغة العربية. السؤال الثاني أنا بقوله, I hope most of the doctors here are Arabic literate, and I believe they are academically. ما هي الافتراض الأساسية حول الاقتصاد والمجتمع بالنسبة التي تدعم مثلا أفكار الإصلاح الاقتصادي؟ هل هذا الشيء ما زال يعني هو حاجة افتراضي وصالح للتغيير؟ يعني التغيير اللي احنا نتمنى إنه يكون في الوضع الاقتصادي في السودان. والسؤال الأول أنا سألته, the question that I asked, I'm going to put it in English, is how can economic reform, be meaningful? I'll just short it that way, in the context of underlying structure that institution, and if there is an institution, completely damaged. Because remember, the institution of the country, even itself, is questionable. For even to have a so-called political stability, adding to also economic, prosperity. And knowing that for a fact, reform, is it enough or we need transformation? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Now it's very clear. I think this one goes to Kimo.
So you are running away?
Yes.
No, it's
Economic
okay.
transformation.
Okay.
And institutional development. Yeah.
Okay. Frankly speaking, I used to say, if you want to change the direction of the organization, change the leader. If you want to change the direction of the country, change the leader. I, for one, I don't believe there is any room for implementing reform under the current context. And for example, take the stipulations of the revitalized agreement. And this is the review I did for Chapter 4. Okay, Chapter 4 was, and this is the uniqueness about this agreement. It's the first time to have a complete chapter about issues of economic, financial, and resource management. I can tell you almost none of the provisions were implemented. Not because they are impossible, but simply because there is no political will to implement those reforms. Why? And this takes me to the question about the underlying assumptions. Okay, why the peace agreement included a complete chapter about economic reform? Okay, because issues of economic mismanagement, and some of us, I don't know if you were around when Edward played the presentations by the Centenary and other groups. Economic mismanagement was a huge, okay, corruption was very huge, okay. That's why those who formulated the agreement thought it wise to include a complete chapter to address the economic mismanagement in the country. Because how do you talk about prosperity? And that's why I challenge even this logo or motto of SPLM, prosperity and all these things. How would you, unless we don't know the meaning of prosperity, if I break it down, I can take two aspects. You have to be literate and you have to be healthy. Okay, look at the government spending on health and education. On average, they were ranging in the budget, okay? Because for us, what matters for us is the actuals. It's not only what was budgeted. They used to budget between 2 and 4% of the national budget, far below the regional rates. Some countries will devote like 10% for any of these sectors. Even when it comes to implementation, we don't find any real amounts. And even if you dig deeper on the amounts allocated to these sectors, you will find that it is going for salaries. So literally nothing for capital development. Okay, so the idea was, if we can reform the economy by then, when they were formulating the agreement, if we can reform the economy, then we can stop issues of economic mismanagement. Then we'll have resources. Okay, we'll have resources, and maybe we can go back to the original idea of the late Dr. John Garang, that we can use oil money to refuel or to fuel other non-oil sectors, and we were very clear about agriculture and also investing on infrastructure. If you want to encourage private sector, not the chapati sellers as M7 mentioned, okay? If we want to attract, we have to have proper physical infrastructure in the country. Communication, electricity, okay, and roads and all that. We did not invest on that. So for me, frankly speaking, I don't expect any reform. My call, I subscribe to the idea of Dr. Peter Adiebo. We need a complete overhaul of the system. It's starting from the top. As Professor Nyamlel said, the fish, and this is not his proverb, anything, I don't know where is it coming from. Any culture can claim that it is there. They say the fish rots from the head. And if you are moving with a fish which is rotten from the head, who will buy such a fish? So the starting point is, if you want to make use of the rescue, you have to cut the head. So this is the challenge for South Sudan. Thank you. I hope I answered your questions.
Yes, you did. And I don't know if Mr. Khan wanted to say something, because I have also a follow-up question, third question on that matter. But go ahead, Mr. Khan.
Yeah, what I would like to add only in this aspect is just like through development theories, for example, fragility, bad governance, political system, and all these things will add into all the crises that we have, economic crisis in general that we are having. So I think where we are at now, as I said or mentioned before, we have reached the junction of transformation, not reform. As you said, or you put it correctly, these things or this system in general, or the governance system and the national policy, whatever we have now, we don't have national policy. I would not say we have national policy, but some may argue that we have national policy that may work to certain group or doesn't work for the others. But it is now just too deformed to be reformed. We just need transformation towards a new Southern Sudanese society or South Sudan society.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Khan. I just wanted to say something also on that article. You know, we agreed, and I believe we're all in that agreement that transformation. I don't know if Brother Urela, Mr. Urela, do you want to say something on that regard? Anything, Talik, or additional to my questions, Mr. Edwin?
I am of the opinion when it comes to transformation or reform. You know, reform is of like incremental change. You assume the foundation is there. But looking at what we have, issues that we are discussing, currently we're just discussing one institution, monetary policy. We haven't even hooked it to the fiscal policy. So you will see there is a need for establishment, not reform. You know, reform, you can't reform something that is dysfunctional. You know, you need to. So I am with the school of thought that it's not reform; it has to be establishment. If that's my position on the reform agenda. Even when we agreed on the reform agenda of 2015, it is just a way that the political reality has put it, and certain things were put in place as a transition to real work. And even these steps that the Doctor talked about in terms of reform agenda, that was tackled in 2015 agreement, things that not necessarily had direct relationship with the conflict, but the partners saw it as an opportunity to dictate a mandate for the transitional government to put the country in a step forward. That's why even in the central bank, we talked about reform of the governance structure. We argued that the president cannot appoint the board of directors and the governor by himself, because we looked into to how these things are done in Kenya, is done in Uganda, in other countries. So these ideas came in, and it was put in the 2015 agreement as a commitment for people not only to get out of the conflict resolution and ceasefire and all this stuff, but also to put the government in a step whereby the reform will be practical. But this one, the regime refused it for obvious reasons. So, story short, I'm not for reform. reform will not do anything. You need to establish systems from zero. Thank you.
أنا ما عندي حاجة كتير دار أضيفه للسؤال بتاع أوديسيو، لأنه بروف كيمو وبروفيسور كون قدر يجاوب على سؤال واريلا. يعني زي ما ذكر دكتور كيمو قبل شوية، عندنا مثلا إنه يعني السما قالوا بيعفن من الراس، وده بالمناسبة لو بدنا نلاحظ الكلام بتاع دكتور كيمو وتقريبا البروفيسور اللي قال الكلام ده، وشلت المفهوم ده وطبقته للواقع بتاعنا في جنوب السودان. ده الحته اللي فيه هسه اننا ما قاعدين نتكلم عن الاصلاح في جنوب السودان، ودي الاشكال ذاته الواجهتها الحركه الشعبيه في المعارضه، وكذلك يعني المعارضات الثانيه الوقع على اتفاقيه بتاع 2018. ولو نينا لاحظنا اجنده بتاع دكتور رياض مشار كان بيتكلم انه لازم يكون في اصلاح في مؤسسات. اذن بتبقى السؤال، انت كيف هتصلح مؤسسات اصلا الفساد فيها جاد بشكل راسي؟ كويس؟ يعني مشكلتنا في جنوب السودان هسه واحد من الاشكاليات بتاع التغيير في جنوب السودان، لانه مش الفساد جاي من التحت. كويس؟ نو، الفساد يعني زي ما ذكر دكتور كيمو قبل شويه، الفساد في جنوب السودان على مستوى الرأسي. الرئاسه بتاعت الدوله جنرالات زي ما قبل انا في فيديو شغلته هنا مثلا بتاعت جوي كولوني. let me try to play it again عشان ده بيساعدنا لكلام اللي قاله دكتور كيمو قبل شويه. yes because دي اول مشكله هنا. and then idea بتاعت انه لازم يكون في اصلاح في جنوب السودان ما بينجح. it's a wasting of time لو نينا بنقول حقائق كنخب ولا كشعب بتاع جنوب السودان. 1 second.
We're prepared to give evidence of massive criminal behavior by the president of South Sudan and by his opposition, the ousted vice president of South Sudan and their generals. The simple fact is
شفتها معناه زي ما انت تسمع كلام بتاع جورج كولوني 2014 يعني زي ما ذكر الدكتور قبل شويه انه فيش rotten from the head. معناه الفساد في جنوب السودان ما من تحت، الفساد في جنوب السودان من القياده العليا. وزي ما شفتوا طبعا بناء على تقارير والريسيرش اللي عملوا ناس جورج كولوني، ده رئيس فاسد، نائب رئيس كان فاسد، والجنرالات في جنوب السودان. اذن what are you reforming here؟ انت يعني تعمل ريفورم لشنو هنا مثلا؟ منو زارك انت يسمع لك انك تعمل ريفورم لطريقه الناس بياكلوا بيه كويس؟ مع الليله في جنوب السودان مجرد ما لقيت منصب كل زول بيحافظ على المنصب بتاعه، بتبقى في استهاله هنا مثلا في اجنده بتاع الريفورم. لونينا ورفعنا شعار انه وي ونت ريفورم. بروفيسور ادوك يابا زي ما قال كون جبال قال الكلام ده، انه الحاصل في جنوب السودان موتايق لثوره ديمقراطيه. انت ما هتقدر تصلح نظام فاسد من الراس وبعدك افسدت المجتمعات في جنوب السودان. وانا شيرت الكلام من جبال ذكروا طالب بتاع دكتوراه ممشر جنوب السودان انه جنوبين يعني شعب بتاع جنوب السودان look like they adopt themselves للوضع الناس عايشينه في جنوب السودان، وخلقوا الوسائل ذاتها يعني they feel they are comfortable, they don't care about الحكومه موجود في جنوب السودان. فانا في رايي بيكون يا اوديسيو ما من السائل انه نتكلم عن الاصلاح سياسي في جنوب السودان باي شكل من الاشكال، ما فيه منطق. ولذلك قبل زي ما انا ذكرت في البدايه انه استنادا لكلام اللي قاله دكتور كيمو انه الاصلاح الاقتصادي في جنوب السودان لن يكون ممكنا في ظل غياب استقرار سياسي. اذن هذا الاستقرار نزل بدوره انت ما ممكن تبنيه دون ما انك انت تعيد النظر في اسس الدوله نفسها، وده اللي انت قبل اشار فيه دكتور كون في البدايه. وعلى هذا الاساس ان هنا بنتكلم عن العوده الى المنصه بتاع التاسيس في جنوب السودان. ليه مثلا بدنا نرجع جنوب السودان للمنصه بتاع التاسيس؟ لانه انت لما بتتكلم عن عوده للمنصه بتاع التاسيس في الجنوب، ده ما معناه انك انت مثلا هذا لا تعني مجرد انك بس مثلا داير تعدل في موازين بتاع السلطه في جنوب السودان. لا، هنا بنتكلم عن لحظه تاريخيه لمراجعه الجذور بتاع المشروع بتاع الدوله اللي تكون مع بعد 2011. لانه الركائز الاساسيه في الدوله التي ما بنيت ما بعد 2011 في جنوب السودان بنيت على الفساد من القياده العليا في الدوله، ولذلك يصعب اي مشروع بتاع الاصلاح في الجنوب في المرحله دي بالذات unless we have to talk about complete change. So انا بجيب كده واريلا ممكن ترجعوا لاوديسو لانه في ناس برضه جاب فوق يعني. شكرا واريلا.
All right. Okay, اوديسو كمل مداخلتك وبعدك نمرر اللاين.
Okay, shukran jazilan. I appreciate the answers, and it's all very productive in this assessment. I just wanted to also add, يمكن ألخبط بالعربي شوية. You know, there is one thing also that many of us, and I believe we are aware of it, but most of us not yet able to find a solution. And this is one of the situations, we can call it elephant in the room, especially in the African continent in general, and especially in particular, I say, in countries where there is conflict. Like South Sudan is not exempt from that. And one of them is, you know, when there is always a conflict in some countries like South Sudan and many, you would see foreign aid comes in. And this is one of the things even to our knowledge that it's a crippling factor, a crippling effect of where most of these, you know, countries, they begin to, instead of focusing on how they can build a perfect economic infrastructure, they start crippling themselves with the idea of depending on these aids. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, based on, you know, for transformists, like let's call ourselves transformists, those who are coming up with a new idea how to establish a cohesive state that can actually bring the opportunities, especially economic opportunity, to the people, to the indigenous, and of course depends on the political stability. With all these political stability, yet you could see even the reason why even the country cannot be stabilized. We have to also remember that these foreign aids sometimes encourage such regimes to continue massing their corruption. So in your idea, from your perspective, the respective moderators, do you think this foreign aid investments, because it becomes like an investment, play a strong economic factor in how the country, you know, like long-term impact in the economic perspective would not go anywhere other than just cripple or go downward like what we see in South Sudan? Or do you think, from your, because I don't know, maybe you have different experience, or do you think it's going to be actually in your first state, if you say you got the chance, the opportunity, would you still depend on these international aid, or you will actually think of other method? And can you give me an example of what happened during 2005 CPA up to the time of independence? What was the role as you guys economists played in that time? Did you guys focus on these aids, or focus more on the resource, or focus on the people empowerment? And I'll leave it here. Thank you.
أنا قبل ما واريلي قبل ما دكتور كيمو يشيل السؤال يجاوب على السؤال بتاع اوديسو ده واحد من الأسئلة عندنا قبل أنا كنت بعد ما كنا نمشي لفقرة نمرة 2 the second paragraph مع باشمهندس واريلي لأنه برضو we supposed to go into that state. أنا كنت أطرح لدكتور كيمو كيف تنظر إلى دور المنظمات الدولية في دعم الاستقرار الاقتصادي في جنوب السودان، وبرضو هل ترى إنها شريكة في الحل، أما هنا الحل يجب أن يكون وطنيا أو أولا زي ما قبل شوية سؤال طرحه وديسو. حاجة تانية أنا كنت داير برضو نربط الحاجة ده مع النقطة دي عشان دكتور كيمو يعلق عليه لأنه وزول somebody actually connected with World Bank and IMF. امبارح يوم 20 فرايداي نائب رئيس دكتور بنيامين بول ومعه طبعا هو ياو vice president and also chairman of economic cluster in South Sudan وكان يجتمع مع the international monetary fund. African department has also committed supporting the government in developing a strong microfinance policies and strategies aimed at driving long-term economic resilience in South Sudan. Includes both technical expertise and also policy guidance to help South Sudan. فأنا كده داير أشوف إنه دكتور كيمو الحاجات دي كلها أنت لو نظرت عليه مثلا أنت ردك شنو للكلام اللي بيصل ده والقابه نظام والدور بتاع المجتمعات الدولية برضو في الجنوب زي ما طرحوا لك هسه أوديسيو. فضل بروف.
شكرا جزيلا. انا ما اعرف اجاوب بالعربي ولا بالانجليزي، لكن المتعارف انه
يا ممكن تجاوب بالعربي ما مش بيكون كويس عشان في ناس كثيرين مشاهدين.
يعني المتعارف انه كثيرا من الاحيان لما الدول تخش في مشاكل، مثلا يكون في كوارث طبيعيه زي حصل في السودان في الثمانينات، يعني سواء كان الفيضانات او الجفاف والتصحر او النزوح اللي حصل نتيجه للحرب في الجنوب في الوقت ده، مرات بيتدخلوا بمفهوم الانسانيه، كويس انه دايرين يعملوا دعم انساني، لانه في شرائح من المجتمع بتكون متاثره الى حد كبير بهذه الازمات. بالنسبه للوضع بتاعنا في جنوب السودان، الجانب ده كان موجود لانه الدوله كانت طالعه من حرب طويله المدى اثرت في البنيه التحتيه وحتى اللايفليهودز بتاعت الناس، وبالتالي في شرائح يعني دخلت تحت ما يسمى خط الفقر وكده، وفي امراض كانت منتشره، وبرضه بيجوا بالجانب الجانب الانساني، كويس. يعني على ما اذكر دكتور كون بيتذكر، يعني اداني فرصه تحدثت في جامعه اوتاوا عن الفورين ايد، كويس. انت مثلا الفورين ايد ده لما تيجي انظر لحاجتين، يعني المبالغ البرامج اللي بتقترح، كويس، والقروش اللي بتجي داخل الدوله، والشيء اللي فعلا بيصل للتارجت جروبس او الافكتد بوبوليشن، كويس. في اغلب الاحيان بيكون تقريبا 10-20% من القيمه الكليه للمشروع، فبالتالي الاثر الفعلي للانترفنشنز ما بيكون ملموس. عشان كده كثير من الدول بتكون داخله في هذه الدائره، ويمكن في اصوات يعني في الجلوبال ساوث زي ما قال البروفيسور كول، او حتى في الديفلوبينج كانتريز بصفه عامه، الناس بدات تتساءل انه احسن لنا يا تو الفورين ايد ولا الفري تريد، كويس. واما الناس المتابعه اللي حاصل في بوركينا فاسو over the last 3 years بتلقى فعلا انه اذا كان الدوله هي امتلكت زمام الامور وعندها سيطره على مواردها، بتقدر تحدث النقله النوعيه، سواء كان في التنميه الاقتصاديه والتنميه الاجتماعيه، كويس. فالاجابه الشورت كات صراحه ما في اثر ملموس لهذه المنظمات الدوليه. يعني حتى من المواقف المذكوره انه كثير من المنظمات دي هم عباره عن وسائل بتاعه تجسس وجمع معلومات عن الدوله المعنيه، او وسائل بتاعه فرض السيطره والتاثير على السياسات او نظام الحكم الموجود، كويس. يعني اخذ مثال مثلا زي الكونغو، من 64 من ما اتقتل باتريك لومومبا نزل UN وكثير من المنظمات قاعدين هناك، لكن هسه احسب في جزء مننا ما يتولد ذاته في الوقت ده، لحد هسه ما في اي استقرار. عشان كده في ناس كثير قنعت انه الناس افضل اذا كان خشينا في حوار مع العالم المتقدم انه ندور فرصه نتاجر بحريه زينا وزيهم، الفائده او العائد بيكون شنو؟ اكثر بالنسبه للدوله. حتى زي ما ذكرت الانترفنشن بتاعهم في اغلب الاحيان ما عنده علاقه بالمدى البعيد، لانه كله ايمرجنسي اندر ايمرجنسي، كويس. وفي كثير من الاحيان يعني دول كثيره بتلقى انه المنظمه هي اللي بتشرف على تنفيذ المشروعات، وهي اللي بتكون مسيطره ومراقبه الموارد الماليه الجاد باسم الدوله. يعني هم بيستغلوا الناس، بيستقطبوا منها وبيجي بيسيطروا عليها. ما بتلقى انه هذه المبالغ معكوسه في ميزانيه الدوله. يمكن المثال اللي انا اختبرته في 2012 مشينا مع وفد من وزاره الماليه لرواندا، زمن ده كان شغال مع البنك الدولي. صراحه اكتشفنا انه رواندا هي واحده من الدول القليله اللي بتفرض اجندتها على المانحين. يعني انت بتجي من هناك بيكون اوريدي عندهم خارطه بتاعت مشاريع والجابس وين من ناحيه جغرافيه، فانت بتجي بخش معاك في حوار يقول لك اوكي جبت قروشك اهلا وسهلا، نقعد في الترابيزه، نحن عارفين اجندتنا شو، نحن عارفين اولوياتنا، جيب قروشك نحن بنضمها في ميزانيتنا، بننفذ المشروعات اللي انت داير مننا. يكون في شفافيه ويكون في تقارير دوريه عن الاداء بتاع المشروعات عشان تقدر تعرف انه قروشك دي مشت. ما كل الدول عندها القدره. انا بتذكر مره كنت بحضر في ورشه في الام بي اس اللي هو ناشونال بيرو اوف ستاتستكس، وبصراحه كنا بنتابع الشغل بتاع الام بي اس ده، فجينا اكتشفنا انه من 2005 واعتقد لحد هسه انه ناس الام بي اس زي ما تقول ما عندهم اي رؤيه ولا عندهم نموذج مثلا عشان يشتغل به لما نيجي للاحصاءات السكانيه. فاي زول بيجي شايل قروشه بيجي بالموديل بتاعه بينفذه وبيمشي، بيجي بقروشه بينفذ الموديل بتاعه بيمشي. فحتى بالنسبه لي يعني in terms of institutional memory, in terms of capacity it is eroded. فمره في واحده من الورش انا انزعجت كويس وادوني فرصه واتكلمت. فالكلام اللي انا قلت يعني it is high time for the leadership of the MBS to be on the driver's seat. يعني انت ممكن انت عندك عربيه بتاعتك وانت تكون راكب. ده الحاصل لكثير من المؤسسات بتاعنا. We are not in the driver's seat. عشان كده الدايركشن اللي بيمشي له الفندنج والبروجكت كويس most of them we call them elephant projects. الناس اللي مشوا لو مشيتوا رومبيك انا ما اعرف مطار شكله كيف، لكن بتذكر لما كنا بنمشي رومبيك يعني في بيت لاترين تولد عادي يعني قطيه كده وبتاع، لكن تعال شوف الدونرز الليسته المنظمات ساهمت في تاسيس التويلت او البيت لاترين كويس. يعني حتى في حاجه زي الجوك كده بيقولوها. شوف الفكره بتاعته بتنشا كيف، يعني بيخلقوا المشاريع دي كيف. يعني قال لك في زول مسكين يعني، او في ناس اخترعت انه يا جماعه والله الزول ده هسه ما عنده محل عشان يشرب فوقه مويه، فقالوا خلاص نعمل له مزيره. جابوا المزيره فقال هسه ها المزيره ده في منو بيملى المزيره ده بالمويه، فقالوا خلاص نشغل زول شنو عشان يملى المويه. بعد شويه قالوا ها طيب المزيره ده لما يفضل بالليل منو بيحرسه، فقالوا خلاص نعين شنو زول يكون غفير، وهكذا انه الناس اللي بقوا اثنين طيب منو بيشرفوا عليهم، فعملوا لهم مشرف. بعد شويه قالوا اوكي دايرين زول كمان عشان الصرف بتاعهم والبيشين، فقاموا عينوا زول شنو زول بتاع فاينانس، زول بتاع نادا اكاونتنج عشان شنو يدير، وهكذا. بعد شويه قام قسم كامل لحد ما في النهايه لقوا نفسهم مهاجرين عماره بيستاف باسم المزيره. فتعال شوف التكاليف اللي حصلت بالنسبه لهذا المشروع والتريكلينج وات از تريكلينج داون. فده ممكن تضرب له مثل وتقيس عليه كثير من المشروعات اللي بتطرح. صراحه لما تتحدث عن المايكرو فاينانس، انا كزول اشتغلت في البنك الدولي، زول بتاع اقتصاد، ده ما جوريسدكشن بتاع IMF الا كان ادوارد ذكر زول ثاني اللي اجتمع مع بولميل كويس.
ده يا زول انا ذكرت يا دكتور IMF
كويس. من حيث المبدا ده ما جوريسدكشن بتاعه، ده ما ده له IMF. IMF شغله لما يكون عندك emergency situation ما قادر تدير الميزان بتاع الميزان التجاري وميزان المدفوعات، بيعمل انترفنشن شورت تيرم انترفنشن عشان تقدر تعالج المسائل دي. يعني مثلا اذا حصل شوك بالنسبه للصادرات بتاعتك زي اللي بيحصل لنا، البترول وقف ولا سعره نقص، بيكون في عجز في الميزان بتاعك، لانه مثلا العاي الشيء اللي انت بتستورده بيكون شنو اكثر من اللي انت قاعد تصدره، فبالتالي في الحاله بيتدخلوا بينفذوا. من المعروف انه IMF هو دائما بيتعاون مع البنك المركزي، لانه بيركزوا على المونيتري اسبكت، وناس الورلد بانك بيركزوا مع الفاينانس لانه they're concerned about the macro economy. انا بتذكر في حوارات يعني حتى كثير من الدونرز كانوا يعني منزعجين، لانه البنك الدولي والIMF هم مثابه الفحيصين بالنسبه للاقتصاد. عشان انت يدينوك ولا يساعدوك لازم تجيب روشتة من المؤسستين ديل انه الزول ده معافى وكده، بناء على الروشتة بتاعته بيدوك يعني كثير من المانحين كانوا بيعتقدوا انه جنوب السودان ما جدير بهذه المساعدات. وطبعا الحجه بتاعت انه هم ما قدروا الجنوب ينزلق الى دائره بتاعت انه يكون فيل ستيت، فكنا بنقول وزان في ستيت عشان تفيل كويس. فناس كتار بيقولوا انه الجنوب ده اتولد از ا فيل ستيت. فالمايكرو فاينانس يعني بتذكر في 2017 2018 قبل ما اطلع ناس اليو ان ويمن كلفوني انه اصمم صندوق لمساعده النساء الشغالين في مجال بتاع البزنس اللي هم سموه to facilitate microfinance or access to finance، لانه في مشاكل بتاعت collaterals وكده، فكانوا بيأسسوا لهذا الصندوق. لكن زي ما انا ذكرت يعني حتى الحديث عن المايكرو فاينانس في غياب الاستقرار السياسي او الاستقرار الاقتصادي، انت انك فاينانس وينو قروش ذاته كويس. you need to have the money before you start lending to the women. باختصار انا بقول ده شغل بتاع public relation ليس الا. ايوه قبل ما الناس تنتقل زي ما انا قلت في مفهوم جديد انا كنت داير اشاركه مع الناس، فلو خلصنا من الحوار قبل ما نمشي للجزء الثاني مع انجينير واريلي، انا just I wanted to highlight
ممكن تشارك كده يا دكتور
من الازمه يعني. نعم
تفضل، ممكن اساتي تفضل كده بكون كويس يا تفضل.
كويس جميل. قبل شويه خلونا افتح اللابتوب بتاعي. طبعا كويس. قبل شوي كنا بنتكلم عن انه ما في استقرار بالنسبه للتينر، سواء كان بالنسبه للمحافظ على البنك اوكي او وزير الماليه. We call this political interference okay in the operations of these two institutions. But اعتقد في ورقه كتبها دكتور بارتيل يعني شاركها معنا في DPF، فدي خلتني just to explore more الكونسبت بتاع revolving fund. I mean sorry revolving door. The whole idea is that there are some people who are switching jobs between the private sector and the public sector. If you look at the background of those who have been governors of the central bank or the Minister of Finance, which is a public sector, have been to the private sector before, or vice versa. You have been in the private sector, then you join the public sector, you have been in the public sector, then you join the private sector. This is what they call the revolving door. Okay, whether it is in politics, especially, is about sometimes lobbying. Initially, it has huge potential of conflict of interest. Okay? When you move from the private sector immediately to the public sector, you still have the connections and you still have the loyalty to the private sector. So when you are there, it will be very difficult for you to be neutral or objective or more aligned to the new employer, which is the public sector. And this constitutes huge conflict of interest. Okay? So, for example, if you are moving, especially if you are moving from the private sector to the private, from the public sector to the private, you will benefit your new employer and vice versa. This is called conflict of interest. Again, it contributes to what they call regulatory capture. For example, if you are moving from the banking, commercial bank, you become a governor or a deputy governor in the central bank, okay, there is a likelihood that you are going to influence the policies of the central bank in favor of the private sector or the private in the industry. Usually this happens in the same industry. Sometimes it's not very serious when you are crossing from one industry to another. But if you are moving like the financial sector هسه زي الكيس بتاعنا كويس يعني شخص عشان يسهل للناس الثاني شخص بيتحرك من القطاع الخاص للقطاع العام ومن القطاع العام للقطاع الخاص في نفس المجال مجال فاينانس او كده كويس. So you capture the regulations كويس. So انت بتأثر على سياسات البنك المركزي اذا انت جاي من القطاع الخاص لصالح شنو؟ القطاع الخاص. ونفس القصه ممكن تحصل يعني انت لو مثلا جاي من البرايفت من الببليك سيكتور you went to the private sector you will be able also to favor يعني you use your connection you use your relationship في البنك المركزي عشان تمرر الاجنده بتاعت القطاع الخاص. السؤال بيطرح نفسه what are the possible consequences? One potential consequence is erosion of public trust. Okay? Because all the institutions, whether they're private or public, they need the trust of the public in them. Okay? And especially if it is government, the government desperately needs the trust from the public. So if you are moving from here to there, definitely this is going to affect the trust of the people in the different government institutions. And again, also unfair advantages. If you are moving, for example, if you were in KCB, whatever your position, and then you join the central bank, you will always favor or work in the interest of the KCB at the expense of the other commercial banks that are operating in the economy, which makes the playground uneven. Okay? So you will be favoring certain. So, and I guess we had a similar situation when I was working with the bank. As an institution, it has its own regulations. Okay? And these are some of the measures that are taken by some institutions to address the consequences of this so-called revolving fund. One of them was what they call the cooling off periods. I remember when I was in the bank, even making use of the information that I had access, the data, everything. When I was exiting the bank, I had to sign that declaration that for the coming 2 years, I'm not going to use any of my knowledge from the bank, from my work with the bank, and share it with anyone. And it has consequences. So this is one way to avoid. If you are moving, for example, you were at the central bank, you are moving to the commercial bank, there must be a cooling period. And it should be clearly stipulated, like 2 years. If you are a deputy governor or whatever at the central bank, you should stay away from taking any job in the commercial bank for 2 years. Why? Because they want to make sure that you lost your connection. You cannot use any of the you cannot influence or you cannot benefit your new employer who is in the commercial bank. And the reverse is true. If you were working for a commercial bank, and if you were to be appointed to the central bank, which is the regulator of the commercial banks, you cannot overnight move from commercial bank to become a leader in the central bank. You must go through that cooling period, such that, again, you don't benefit your commercial bank, or you cannot influence the policies of the central bank to benefit your new employer. And again, also some institutions restrict, they impose some restrictions on lobbying activities. And I think this should have applied, and I can tell you a story of one of the former members of the board of directors. And that should have, and this is another issue I would like also to let people know. When it comes to appointment of members of the board of directors of the central bank, because these are very sensitive positions, is oversight and everything. You cannot appoint somebody who is financially vulnerable to become a board member. You cannot employ somebody who is unemployed. You cannot appoint somebody to the board of directors, even commercial bank, who has no job. They can easily be manipulated, even by the central bank. And the person I'm talking about was involved in facilitating the exchange of SSP for the dollar. And one day he surprised us with a brand new hard top. Hard top by that time was 40,000. So you can easily imagine how much was involved in that transaction in order for you to get a reward of a hard top by that time. That should be a restriction when it comes to scrutinization of the members of the board. You cannot be financially vulnerable and then you want to become a board member. Okay? And again, you are not supposed to manipulate the policies of the central bank to benefit yourself or to benefit anybody else. And I think maybe this is where the president was talking about the 10%. The auctioning, the exchange of SSP for USD, because of the shortage in the US dollar, some people have to use these bribes in order to influence some of the leaders at the bank to facilitate the issuance of the dollar. So sometimes you are restricted. There are certain areas you shouldn't be involved in them. And again, there must be some ethical rules that must be enforced, whether it's a profession or the institution. So I think I will stop here. These are the things that I wanted to share with us, because we need to understand the broader picture of the crisis in which we are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. Professor Kwon, do you have any comment before we move the line to Engineer Fadal?
ما في مشكلة، بس أنا ما أعرف في الموضوع الفورن ايد أو كان نضيفه حاجات بسيط.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Doctor.
So the concept is as we know, is a new liberal concept that have been in Africa for over 50 years. But now, with the revolution, like West African neo-political approach to neoliberalism that is happening now in West Africa, especially Ibrahim Traore. When Ibrahim Traore came to the office, with all the poverty and health issues that can happen in Burkina Faso, he found a lot of money in the presidential palace. And then he kept asking, like, this money, what do we need it for? For the analogy here is just that with all the minerals that we have in South Sudan, with all the gold, with oil, fertile land, the richest, probably country compared to relatively poor countries that are really doing well now, why do we need, foreign aid? And this is why I ask always, like, anybody who is doing, or advocating for aid to South Sudan, like, I'm like, why do we always talk about aid, but we don't talk about trade? I have something that I can sell you and get money and feed my people, instead of just like you giving me food. And not even food, like forage, jajara, and, artificial milk. And I have real milk here. I have cows. I have, what it takes to feed my people. And because, like, you have to do more research around the cash crop and the trading with the West, and how West design aid as, means to put, to keep Africa poor as they are now, while advocating for only crops that will give them money, things like cocoa, for example. They'll say, this is what I need for you to grow so that you can do trade. Don't grow stuff that will feed your, your people, because I'm not going to give you money for it. Like, if I give you money to feed your people, what am I going to do in return? I'm not buying your corn. I'm not buying your sorghum. I need coke. I need, like, coffee. I need things like what they call cash crops, but not things that we need actually for our people. But again, then we'll say, like what Zimbabwe have done before, then I will give my farmers incentives to farm for their own, and at the same time, farm for you to support. And then they said, if you are giving your farmers, the subsidy, why should I also, support you? So there is a neoliberalism approach to it, and those are the areas that we, or the new generation that are coming to take over in future, to decolonize all this approach, to say, like, what Ibrahim Traore is doing now, and he's doing really good. He said, no, I have it all. I have mineral, I have everything. You French, get out. And when they told French to get out of Burkina Faso, they are fighting. They said, like, why should you kick us out? You need us. And the system said, no, we don't need you. We have everything that we need to keep ourselves, sustainable, to sustain our economy, to alleviate our poverty. We could do it our own. We don't need whatever you are bringing us. So it is the new approach that we should, slowly adapt in so many African countries, to say we need trade, we don't need aid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, bro. Fadal Warele.
بس خلينا نعتذر لدومينيك وجورج ودكتور خطيناكم في انتظار لكن بنديكم فرصة هسه. I just want to touch point on this foreign aid approach and my philosophy. And my philosophy on this aid thing is very clear. I'm coming from school of thought that puts foreign aid as an obstacle to development. And people who want to research this school of thought, read Domiso Bayer's Dead Aid, and other authors who have argued, have done research and reached conclusion that actually the overall impact of aid in Africa is negative. We don't need aid. And there's nothing called aid investment. Aid is not investment. Aid is grant, something given for you for free. Does that mean that we will not be dealing with the international markets or the international finances? No, there are other ways of dealing with it. I don't even want to deal through World Bank, by the way. I'm not of the school of thought that an economist from other countries should come and tell me how I should regulate my hard currency. No. I always say, if you don't have economists to run a country, you don't deserve a country. So if you're looking for cash used to be under the mercy of IMF recommendation that you have access to finances. This is not the contemporary market does not work that way. You just need to work on your legal system, your political stability that we're talking about, your ease of business. Then you can negotiate with financial institutions from anywhere. actually opens you avenues for you to select investors. So, in short, my school of thought is of investment, of trade. I don't need anybody to come and tell me my priorities in terms of areas of development. If I go on that track, then I'm not independent. Then why did I ask for a country? So that might be radical to the current thoughts that are there in South Sudan. But for me, even with the neighbors, our neighbors, this thing of my brother, these are my brothers, and we need to be, no, I want to engage with Kenya on not only on a way that is like a parasite to me. It's not, I want companies that are established, for example, in processing, to come and invest real money in South Sudan, and I'll provide the environment for them to do that. The overall trade balance between me and Kenya will be beneficial to Kenya and beneficial to me. So areas like agriculture, the basic agriculture in terms of production, I don't need somebody to bring me tomatoes, but I can negotiate with Ugandan companies or factories in Kenya who have moved into processing to come and invest in processing, for example. All countries does that. Every single country with people with brain have some coconut brain in their coconut, they think like that. So the idea of independence, half-baked independence, does not work. Either you have it, you can manage it, or you can't manage it. Why should I ask for Janjaro come? I want to be able to supply aid to Ukraine. Why not? Why can we supply Dura when hunger strikes elsewhere? What is it that other people can do, we cannot do? So aid, IMF, policies, restructuring stuff for me is non-starter. That's not my school of thought. Thank you very much. Dominic, it's over.
شكرا وريلك. خلينا اسلم عليكم كل دكتور كيمو. السلام عليكم دكتور كون اوداشيوس جورج واخونا دكتور موزيس والناس اللي بيستمعوا لنا. I got engrossed into this discussion because بقى شيء جدا. It really force somebody to come and say one or two into this discussion. I tend to agree with you, Kimo, that you need to start political stability and security stability in order to unleash the potentials of your development, be it economical and other forms of development. And even these notions of the fact that we need to use our oil resources in order to develop the other sectors of the economy. To extract oil resources in and of itself need political stability and vis-a-vis actually security guarantors. Otherwise, you will be losing a hell lot of money in standby charges, because the types of the contracts that are signed does not favors any delays and upheaval situations in the country. So stability, political stability, security stability is actually a driver towards economical prosperity. That I will agree with you on it. However, South Sudan is a state that has been captured by cabals, oligarchs, and these monsters of our time. And I also tend to agree with you that unless we decapitate ourselves from these controls and a state capture, we will continue to be in this deplorable situation for as long as these people continue to be there. And one of the failures is an institutional failures, but an institutional failures that came out with the SPLM as a new kid in the political arena of the South. And they have forced themselves into the equations and the expenses of each and every person that is there. And so if you look at the conflict in South Sudan, it is a conflict that regurgitates from the same organizations, carrying with it all the years of the failures, and taking into consideration is also the quality of those leaders that are actually managing the state of affairs in the country. You know, in 2005, when the Comprehensive Peace Agreement was signed, when some of these guys came to Khartoum, we were discussing with some of the members of the SPLM who came from the bush. And one of the things that was catchy during that time was for us to showcase to them the example of the National Congress Party. You know, when these guys came, they made a very big conference. You know, and yes, they wanted to bring salam, but peace is a process, and for you to bring peace, you need actually to transist the people to prosperity. And that is why الطفرة اللي حصلت في السودان استخراج بتاع بترول والرفاهية اللي حصلت, it is part and parcel of the resolutions of this conference, where minds are brought. And so with this in mind, the SPLM came with these I know principles. And I think it is these I know principles that continue with them until they hit the failures that we're seeing. And such, in and of itself, especially now that the country has reached this position where we are now, it will be circulations of failures, because now this is trials and error, accompanied with what Kimo, you have said, that is actually the revolving doors and the lobbies that are happening, because everybody now seeing this sector not as, for example, the Bank of South Sudan, the Ministry of Finance, and the Nile Pet. They are looking at it as an avenue or a place where at least you can be able to get money and enrich yourself. And that becomes the motivations and the drivers that push the people. Somebody will talk that, be careful, we are lobbying. And I will never mention one of these MDs. But he need contracts. But it was very difficult to get the contracts because the procedures that were being set and all this kind of stuff is a little bit difficult. And for them to do, when one of their sons came up, they started lobbying. And indeed, the guy became one of the managing directors of Nile Pet. And the rest was actually history. So these are kinds of the incentives people are looking at. And therefore, job security becomes a problem. And once job security becomes a problem, it affects the overall management of a particular institution. Before you have a grace period where you can be able to implement your plans and the things that you have in mind as to why even you accepted that particular job, you are removed out of the job. And the worst part is that the removing and the appointing authority, it doesn't actually look into these ulterior motives. He's also been overwhelmed by some of the glories and the praises that have been given to him, and also worries and also desperations, because somebody will come and say that forgetting that it is not actually that particular person, but it is an institution that is set out. So the issue of reforms vis-a-vis overhaul has to take into considerations even our own cultures and our own, beliefs and our own honesty in what we wanted to do. So, عشان كده التربية الوطنية ده, it will take us long before we can place it in South Sudan. I was when you guys were discussing about the issues of reform vis-a-vis overhaul, I was reminiscing these things. I was like, okay, assuming that we put all necessary legislatives in place, the constitutions, and we still have the same people on the ground, will the situation change? Definitely will not change. And then it becomes apparently that even the removing of the head in and of itself is not a solution. Because the whole system is rotten, creating a distrust and a dissatisfactions even among the people. And this is one of the things that we must, especially those of us who are in the opposition, must start to now bring back this as a reminder that as we wanted to change the political dispensation in the country, we need to now put into place a system, that will not only redeem whatever is there, but it will give people, the trust, so that the leader in the helm, and here we've been citing, Rwanda, we've been citing other countries. It is all leadership, and I agree with Dr. Kimo. It is all about the leadership and the charisma of a particular leader in trying to ensure that these kinds of things are there. So that when we talk of Ibrahim Traore came from a humble background, and he has seen it. What is wrong with us? I like to conclude with these issues with aid vis-a-vis foreign or trade or foreign direct investment. Now, maybe you people will have to shed light that in the global situation in which we are now, and in new world order, whether this is liberalism, neoliberalism, there is a sense in which you have to, control your national discourse. And that is why when Trump came to power, making America great again, some people were sick about it. People are disgusting, especially when he started shutting, dockets like the US aid that has been there. Some people are complaining. But other Africans were saying that is good because it will give us the opportunity to unleash the potential. Because for as long as the African independent states we've been, encapsulated into this idea of, these masters that have to control our economy, and we have to, the sources of our productions, they have to come and take raw materials from Africa. So this is a time that, we need to look inward and develop the potentials of our nation. And to do that, we need to create that enabling environment. Not like what we have in Cuba, where people who have at least substance in their brain are chased out because they don't belong to the tribe of the president. That is where a problem comes, you see. So even as we are talking about these things, foreign direct investment, unless we have all the necessary regulatory frameworks in place, not just a framework, but to enforce them. Because it is one thing to have all these documents in place, and it is another thing in order to see to be that it is followed to the letter and the spirits of the text and the desires that was actually put when drafting these documents. Because I remember, if you look at our investment laws, our investment laws, say that for you to do a business in South Sudan, because initially if somebody will come with 100% shares, just get into the business, 99%, I have a local person as a South Sudanese, and they go with the money. So people said, when the drafters were drafting this, they said that for you to do a business in South Sudan, you must either have a local partner or you enter into a JV where that company comes and work, and then you pay that company as a service, or you form a JV, but then the cutoff shares, it must not be less than, I think 31 or something like that. I'm not sure off my head. But when we were actually trying to enforce this in our oil sector management after the dissociation between Sudan, يعني في زمن بتاع فض الارتباط الناس البرسنتج بتاع اللوكال البارتنرز كان كله يعلم بتاع الناس كبار وزراء والجماعه ديل وكده. وانا قريب ده كنت قاعد اتكلم ما ضربت لواحد من الزملاء بتاعنا، يعني مرات طبعا اخوان وكده، يعني احساس بتاع الزمان ده جات شلت التليفون ضربتها له، كيف يا قريبي؟ فانا كنت سالت انتوا كيف هناك انتوا قاعدين تلقى شغل كونتراكت مع الوضع الصعب ده؟ قال لا يا دبلي والله زمانكم ده كان شويتين كويس، يعني انتوا الناس بيجي بيلقوا شغل ومعظمكم كانوا شغالين. I just wanted to attest to what Dr. Kimo you have just said. أنه في زمان إحنا كنا قاعدين نعمل الكلام ده we are public servants بنتعامل مع الناس اللي بيجي برا، لكن قال هسه الموظفين اللي موجودين في شركات دي هم عندهم companies، يعني السيرفيسز دي بيمشي له، انت ممكن تجري نهار بالليل ما بتلقى كونتراكت، بس الاولويه لازم يمشي لك، انت ما ممكن تكون جعان وفي ناس تانيين يتمتعوا بقروش وكده وانت في موقع يا صناعه القرارات. فقال جل احنا وصلنا فوقه، قلت والله مبروك. فقام قال لنا والله يا اخي البلد ده انتهت، لكن احنا نعمل شنو؟ قلت لهم ما عندنا خيار غيرنا اننا نخرج البلد ده من الوضع احنا فوقه ده. فانا قلت سألته قلت له حاصل شنو؟ قال لي يا اخي والله يعني الناس دي حسا مشوا في تشاينا وكده، ناس عند سكرتري مشى في تشاينا، وبعد من الجماعه دي هم ماشيين يناقشوا مع تشاينيز. قلت اوكي that's good، لكن هم دارين يناقشوا شنو؟ قالوا والله يا اخي الجماعه دي يجوا يشتغلوا. قلت له then you are going to negotiate from a bad or from a desperate situation. It constructs, you are going to negotiate from a bad precedent, and that is why our negotiations, whether these are loans from Exim banks, these are loans from companies like Trafagora and other commercial banks, are desperate loans. These are desperate loans. You negotiate it when you are so very desperate, and you fall into accepting the terms of these contracts. And that is why I tend to agree, and I would like to conclude with it that in a situation where your country is not stable and it is captured by cabals and oligarchs and these kind of people, you are just at the mercies of even the foreign direct investors, because you will be giving into some of your regulatory frameworks on a bit to get the money that you need in order to run either your economy or something like that. And in most cases, the monies that are loaned or you are bringing into the country will not serve the interest or the intended use as to why these monies are loaned or For example, if you bring, like, for example, our only source of revenue, that is actually in a very bad state. The monies that you bring, if you don't use it in a manner that addresses your need, then you will be forced to borrow money to pay salaries. Is it worth doing it? It will not be an economy that, you will be the one to, give us answers to these types of questions. But I appreciate and I thank, you guys. This is a very important discussion that we need to continue to discuss with these people, with the people of South Sudan, with the hope that even these guys that are in Juba, they will not even benefit from it going forward. Thank you so very much. Let me stop it at here.
يا شكرا باشمهندس دومينيك. قبل ما نمشي قدام انا داير اقفل الفيسبوك ويوتيوب. مشت عليها 3 ساعات و16 دقيقة وجاس I want to close فيسبوك and يوتيوب. لكن انا داير اقول للناس المشاهدين في يوتيوب وكذلك فيسبوك انضموا لنا في كلاب هاوس. قبل شوية في واحد في يوتيوب إيليا كان بيسألني إنه كيف أيمشي يوتيوب كيف. أنا داير كلاب هاوس. I posted the link بتاعت Clubhouse. للزول اللي ما عنده Clubhouse, download the Clubhouse and just write the Voice of the People forum or filling and I share it there. When you click on that link, will actually lead you to download the Clubhouse and then will take you to Clubhouse, which is actually free. There is no payment for it. Unless you need to subscribe to bundle بتاعتهم. فشكرا للناس اللي شاهدوا. وانا بشكر دكتور كيمو ودكتور كون وباش مهندس واريلة للنقاش بتاع الليله. ونينا نتواصل برضو أن نجي في حلقه تانية قبل في موضوع بتاع القبليه خدناه ليوم تاني. أن نجي ان شاء الله بعد ما نشوف الزمن بتاع بروفيسور كون and then we'll come again with واريلة وكون ودكتور كيمو also. نمشي في الموضوع ده نستفيد من خبره بتاعت دكاتره بروفيسورات بتاعتنا في جنوب السودان في إثارة الحوار والتوعية بتاع الشعب بتاع جنوب السودان. ده المهم. وعلى هذا الأساس أنا داير أشكر نيابة عنكم كلكم بروفيسور كيمو وبروفيسور كون وبالذات بصفة خاصة دكتور كيمو لقبوله يعني ولزمنه. ما سهل يعني الليلة اللي قاعد معنا لحد ياسا 3 ساعات. أنا بشوية ندي لواريلة بعد بنرجع كلاب هاوس لأنه دايرين نشوف زمنه كمان باقي له كم دقيقة تاني لأنه دايرين نحول نديه زمن وكذلك دكتور كون يمشوا لحياتهم. So maybe الجزء الثاني احتمال ان احنا ما نمشي فيه الليله لانه هنا فوق المداخلات. ممكن ان احنا نرتب للحلقه الثانيه عشان نقدر نسمع لدكتور دكتور كيمو ودكتور كون نخليهم يمشوا وكده. So لكن ده كله هنا نكمله في كلاب هاوس. للعموم شكرا لكم وربنا يبارك فيكم ونحن هنستمر في التوعية إن شاء الله بتاع الشعب بتاع جنوب السودان. So باشمهندس واريلة and take over, let's continue.